Chapter 483 Immortals Live Forever. Why would they care about a partner? Chapter 483 Immortals Live Forever. Why would they care about a partner? Dan Qingzi had been waiting in the lawless tower all this time. He was left with only foundation establishment realm cultivation now. Now, he saw a glimmer of hope. He wouldn't have to wait much longer to die. However, he occasionally called some colorful names at the people passing by. The Heavenly Note sect had broken their promise again. They didn't kill Jiang Hao, and this time they didn't even bother to pretend. They just made him wait. But that was fine. He would wait. When the time came, he would take matters into his own hands. There would be an opportunity. While Dan Qingzi was still planning, Baiji had already arrived at the highest point of the Heavenly Note sect. The 100 Flowers Lake was where the sect master lived, and others couldn't enter even if they visited the place unless they could deceive the sect master's perception. As she ascended, she saw a red figure in the pavilion. She seemed to be at the center of everything. She exerted an invisible pressure on the newcomer. Sect master. Baiji bowed respectfully. Hong Yuye seemed to come back to her senses. She turned and glanced at her. Have you found out something else? I have found out a lot. Baiji nodded. In the past few days, Dan Qingzi from Azure Mountain revealed much information, like who commissioned him, and so on. Oh. Hong Yuye seemed interested. He admitted that the reason Azure Mountain took action was mostly because of that other person, and their main purpose was to probe the limits of our sect. His intention was to force the sect master to take action, said Baiji. According to what he said, this was not his original intention, but someone put him up to it. The person who commissioned him is from the Great Thousand God sect named Feng Hua. In the past few days, I have looked into the information about the Great Thousand God sect, and it seems that there is no such person there. We are still investigating. Besides wanting to test the limits of the sect, this person seems to want to find out more about the heavenly fragrance Dao flower. However, Dan Qingzi does not know the people from the Great Thousand God sect who came before, as well as those from Azure Mountain who had contact with outsiders. Can he still contact Feng Hua? Hong Yuye asked. He said he can't anymore, but he gave me a coded message. That person might have received the news that Dan Qingzi was captured. It's unlikely that the coded message will be a success. We haven't tested it yet. We fear that it might startle him. Baiji then went on to outline the follow-up plans. For now, we have given up monitoring Dan Qingzi and let his cultivation realm be absorbed in the tower. Hong Yuye was surprised. What's your plan? Baiji lowered her head and said earnestly, he is very cooperative and doesn't take his cultivation seriously. Moreover, he insists that Jiang Hao must die. In my opinion, he must have something to rely on and a method of liberation. So, we are waiting for him to take action. The people are ready, and with the cooperation of a Sky Origin Realm cultivator, even if he escapes back to Azure Mountain, it will be easy to find him. According to my speculation, his method of release might be related to the Great Thousand Avatar. There are traces of the Great Thousand Avatar technique on him. If everything goes smoothly, we will find him and observe him in secret. Hong Yuye nodded. And Jiang Hao? There have been no new discoveries for the time being. The only change is that he has advanced to the Golden Core realm. Baiji was not surprised. The advancement happened after the team returned from the Bright Moon sect when most people's attention was diverted. This may be the opportunity he was looking for. Before going out, Baiji had already guessed that Jiang Hao was about to advance and that he was waiting for a good opportunity. There were currently no clues about the person behind him, so she didn't dare to mention it. After that, she reported other matters. The sect was currently recuperating, so there wouldn't be any major events for the time being. The only things to be concerned about were the mines and the sea fog cave. The sea fog cave might cause some waves overseas. The appearance of disciples from their sect in the sea might attract some curious people. This was easily solvable. There was no need to go all out. At Azure Mountain, a foundation establishment realm cultivator looked at Jiang Hao. A wandering cultivator, she asked. She was an inner disciple of Azure Mountain and was responsible for recruiting new disciples this time. Yes, a wandering cultivator. Jiang Hao nodded. In order to safely enter Azure Mountain, he chose to join the sect under the identity of a wandering cultivator. Both his appearance and name had been changed. Whether it was Azure Mountain or Heavenly Note sect, they usually recruited Foundation Establishment realm cultivators when accepting new disciples. The highest was usually the Golden Core realm. No one could see his real cultivation realm, which was at the middle stage of the Soul Ascension realm. It made things much easier. Cultivation realm, the Foundation Establishment realm cultivator asked. I'm at the 9th stage of Lifeblood Refinement realm, Jiang Hao said. Your name? Jiang Tian. Age? 31. 31 at the 9th stage of Lifeblood Refinement realm? The Foundation Establishment realm cultivator frowned. But she found this quite normal. The reason the wandering cultivator joined their sect was probably to obtain Foundation Establishment pills through the sect's resources. It would give him hope to advance to the Foundation Establishment realm. Achieving Foundation Establishment realm in one's 30s was quite ordinary. Wait over there, said the Foundation Establishment realm cultivator. Later, he obtained a token to enter the trial. If he failed, he wouldn't be able to join the sect. Jiang Hao was unconcerned about this. As expected, everything went smoothly, and he entered Azure Mountain with a mediocre result. It was different from the Heavenly Note sect in the sense that the various branches' true disciples would pick a portion of the disciples and send the rest to the outer sect. Jiang Hao deliberately made his aura very low, so he was successfully sent to the outer sect. This way, no one would be watching him. That night, he figured out where the tasks were issued. The next day, he took on a task. He accepted a task that rewarded Foundation Establishment pills. It was exceptionally difficult to complete. Most likely, 8 or 9 out of 10 would die outside, and this was what he wanted. Today was the 4th day, and he had to go back tomorrow. After that, he would disappear from Azure Mountain. It was unlikely anyone would care about a wandering cultivator who came for Foundation Establishment pills. Even if someone remembered him, they would probably just sigh and say, he came for Foundation Establishment pills but died for it. After accepting the task, Jiang Hao returned to his residence and did not hurry to go to the back of the mountain. He needed to understand the situation there first. He spent a spirit stone to learn a lot from a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator. He asked about the person he was actually there for, and the person volunteered the information. He also found out many gossips, like the second top disciple liking the first. Many cultivators went to the back of the mountain. However, there was one place they wouldn't approach, and that was the green tea tree. It was said that approaching it would trigger a curse. What kind of curse is it? Jiang Hao was genuinely curious. It is said that if couples go there, their relationship would suffer. What if someone isn't in a relationship? Then, they wouldn't be able to find anyone in their lives. Jiang Hao was quite surprised. Why would there be such rumors in Azure Mountain? The world was vast, and immortals lived long lives. Why would someone care so much about finding a partner? After confirming that most disciples could go to the back of the mountain, he was no longer worried. In the afternoon, Jiang Hao arrived at the back of the mountain. He buried a ring there and then left the sect to complete the task. After that, he returned to the back of the mountain through the ring. On the way, he did encounter some people who seemed close to each other. But he ignored them. He needed to find out where the green tea tree was and see how much strength the avatar left by Dan Qingzi had. Dan Qingzi's true cultivation realm was definitely far beyond the Soul Ascension realm. His avatar definitely wasn't weak. It's been 4 days already. He must be leaving the Lawless Tower soon. I need to speed things up. Chapter 484, Chapter 484, A Young Girl. Chapter 484, A Young Girl. In the morning, Dan Qingzi was brought out of the Lawless Tower. He was at the 6th stage of the Lifeblood Refinement realm. He was to be sent to the mines. The Heavenly Note sect didn't kill him, which disappointed him, but it didn't matter. Once he left the Lawless Tower, he would be free. He would have ended his life on the spot if not for avoiding unnecessary trouble. Now was not the time to hurry. Once he entered the mines, No one would be watching him at all times. Escaping would be easy. Soon, Dan Qingzi was sent to the mines. He held a hoe and approached a pool of lava. The scorching heat and boiling magma were daunting. It seemed capable of incinerating everything. Entering with his cultivation realm would undoubtedly result in death. Seeing this, a smile crept onto Dan Qingzi's lips. Heaven is helping me indeed. As he passed by the lava, he was the last in line. Without a second thought, he jumped in. In the blink of an eye, he saw the astonishment of the people around him and felt the pain of being burned by the lava. But everything was worth it. He was free now. In the rear, two figures watched Dan Qingzi die. They were unsurprised. Inform the others. We can begin. They were going to set up another trap for Dan Qingzi and find out who he had been in contact with. In Azure Mountain, a young girl was sleeping in a pit under the green tea tree. At this moment, her body, devoid of any power fluctuations, had undergone a complete transformation. Her lifeblood surged, and her spiritual power was vast. Gradually, her fingers began to move, and her long eyelashes fluttered. When her spirit enveloped her body, she suddenly opened her eyes. She looked confused for a moment. Then, the confusion was replaced by sheer joy. Ha ha ha! I escaped. She sat up and looked at her new body and felt the satisfying strength within her. Assured of her safety, she let out a sigh of relief. Jiang Hao from the Heavenly Note sect can't come here. She looked around in puzzlement. Why had she woken up under this tree? When she realized this, her pupils contracted. A long blade pierced through her from behind. Blood dreaded down the silver-white blade that carried a force that could crush everything. I was actually already here, said a cold voice from behind. Dan Qingzi was bewildered. Jiang Hao? How could a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator have such strength? The girl detonated all the surrounding formations, but no power appeared. How could this be? At that moment, another long blade slashed toward her neck. It carried a purple aura. Boom. Dan Qingzi blocked the attack with one arm and paid the price of losing it. Then, she smacked away the long blade from her chest. She stepped back and looked at the man in front of her. This attack wasn't something a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator could manage. However, what she saw was indeed a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator in front of her. Jiang Hao held the long blade and looked at her indifferently. Dan Qingzi felt that this was absurd and funny. How could this person have such strength while appearing to be at the Foundation Establishment realm? What's your cultivation realm? She asked cautiously. The sect already knows that I've advanced to the Golden Core realm recently, Jiang Hao said. In fact, he was quite puzzled. Finding the green tea tree was easy, but he quickly noticed the problem there. It took some effort to dig it out, but everything went smoothly. However, after digging it out, he was surprised. He found a teenage girl there. Although she harbored the power of a peak primordial spirit realm, she didn't resemble Dan Qingzi's clone at all. The difference was significant. For safety's sake, he even appraised her. The answer he got told him that this girl was indeed Dan Qingzi's avatar, but she woke up right at that moment. Golden Core realm? Dan Qingzi didn't believe it. Immediately, she erupted with power and attacked. However, despite her formidable momentum, she turned and fled after releasing her power. Bang! In midair, she was pierced through by a long spear, and she fell. She couldn't understand why the person before her, who appeared to be at the Foundation Establishment realm, possessed such immense power. This avatar had the cultivation of the primordial spirit realm. Even if Jiang Hao used everything he had, he shouldn't have been able to overpower someone in the primordial spirit realm. When she hit the ground, Jiang Hao appeared next to her. Then, he made his move. Stop. A long sword pierced through her body again. I just wanted to ask you a question. Another long sword pierced through yet again. Pain and powerlessness spread through Dan Qingzi. She looked around but couldn't see the attacker clearly. I will tell you anything. Will you spare my life then? Fear of death made her submit. Of course. A third sword appeared in Jiang Hao's hand, but he didn't attack her. He appeared right in front of Dan Qingzi. What do you want to know? Asked Dan Qingzi. Feng Hua. I want to know about him, Jiang Hao said calmly. Feng Hua is a hidden elder of the Great Thousand God sect. His task is to find suitable people in various sects, make friends, and trade, Dan Qingzi said. Are you also part of this trade? Was the position of honorary elder given to you by him? Jiang Hao asked. You. Dan Qingzi was shocked. How did he know about this? Dan Qingzi hadn't said anything about that to the Heavenly Note sect. So, how did he find out? Something like that. We started with a trade, but after the trade was over, we no longer had any connection. The Great Thousand God sect seemed reluctant to let go and finally lured me in as an honorary elder. I can enjoy the resources they give me and don't need to do anything, except when they ask for my help. Then, how do I find this Feng Hua? Asked Jiang Hao. There's no way to find him. Usually, he comes looking. Dan Qingzi shook his head. Jiang Hao lowered his head and thought about it. Dan Qingzi exploded with power at this moment and flew into the sky with a whoosh. I advise you to leave as soon as possible. The commotion here has become too big. The people of Azure Mountain will be here soon. Dan Qingzi sneered. Jiang Hao sighed and circulated his energy. He appeared behind her amidst her mocking laughter. He swung the primordial heavenly blade and used the first form. Moon slaying. Dan Qingzi's eyes narrowed. Her entire defensive magic shattered under moon slaying, and her defenses crumbled. A shield barely managed to block the attack. Dan Qingzi smiled. Suddenly, a long blade swept across her neck. At that moment, she was still smiling. But soon, her face distorted in terror. The second form of the heavenly blade, mountain suppression, slashed down. Dan Qingzi was cleaved by the blade. The two of them landed on the ground, with Jiang Hao picking up the enemy's storage magic treasure and then burning the body with fire. Only then did he undo the illusion of the heavenly cauldron, cover the big pit, and disappear from the spot. At the law enforcement hall in the Heavenly Note sect, some people were trying to find Dan Qingzi's location. In the beginning, everything was going smoothly, and they found some clues. But soon, the clues disappeared. This puzzled the group. After several discussions, they arrived at the conclusion that Dan Qingzi was really dead. Their plan had failed. Chapter 485, The Sudden Appearance of the Demoness. Chapter 485, The Sudden Appearance of the Demoness. Jiang Hao breathed a sigh of relief as he returned to his courtyard. He had nearly let Dan Qingzi escape. He needed to be more careful, especially when making enemies with someone in the lawless tower. But it seemed that Mi Lingyu and King Hai Luo didn't hold it against him. I wonder how King Hai Luo would react after returning. Jiang Hao shook his head in disbelief. I wonder if he will be like Shong'an or different. He would only find out in the next gathering. Given King Hai Luo's status and influence, Liu would definitely pay attention to it and bring it up at the gathering. Jiang Hao took out Dan Qingzi's storage treasure. He found 20,000 spirit stones inside. So many. Soon, he shook his head again. It was too little for someone like Dan Qingzi. Did Dan Qingzi prepare such a small amount of spirit stones for his backup plan? However, there were quite a few pills for the primordial spirit realm. There were also talismans and 2 magical treasures. One was a spirit sword at the Soul Ascension realm, and the other was a magical treasure to block attacks. However, this magical treasure had cracks all over it and had lost its luster. Is this an innate Dharma treasure? He remembered that he hadn't dealt too much damage to the magical treasure at that time, so it must have been damaged because of the owner's death. Thus, it was worthless and could only be sold. It wasn't even clear if it could be sold. After all, it was severely damaged. Maybe it'll fetch a few thousand spirit stones. For something acquired by chance, he didn't mind taking a little loss when selling it. What mattered was getting spirit stones. Otherwise, this treasure was just scrap metal. He then placed each item on the table and intended to check other gains. But just as he had placed them on the table, a fragrance wafted up from behind. Quite a few good things you've got here, said a teasing voice. Jiang Hao, who had intended to put away the items, froze and then turned to look. It was Hong Yuye. Her long hair flowed down. She was dressed in a red and white gown. A strand of air fell on her chest. "Greetings, Senior." He greeted her respectfully. "Are these all yours?" Hong Yuye walked to the table and examined the items. "They belong to a senior. I am temporarily keeping them for him and will return them after some time. I am just double-checking to ensure nothing is missing," Jiang Hao said seriously. "A senior?" Hong Yuye sat down and looked at him with narrowed eyes. "What kind of senior is this?" "A senior whom I deeply respect. He is unrestrained. He is not bound by worldly constraints and never bothers with the differences between men and women. He transcends the prejudices of the mundane world," Jiang Hao said earnestly. "Is that so?" Hong Yuye was quite interested. "Is this senior a man or a woman?" Jiang Hao hesitated momentarily and then said, "I think a man." He had first met Dan Qingzi as a man, so he was probably a man. Later, he had taken on a female avatar. But Jiang Hao wasn't sure if that counted as Dan Qingzi being a woman. "Do you wait for him to come back and retrieve these things?" Hong Yuye looked down at the table. "Yes." Jiang Hao nodded. "The senior trusts me, and I am not an ungrateful person." Hong Yuye fell silent. Then, she looked at him with a smile. "Do you think I'm an ungrateful person?" The question puzzled Jiang Hao, but he quickly said, "Senior, you are highly respected and naturally not ungrateful. Do you trust me?" Hong Yuye asked again, with a smile growing on her face. It was an unsettling smile. Jiang Hao hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. "I trust you." "Well then," Hong Yuye narrowed her eyes. "How about I help you keep these things for your senior?" Jiang Hao was at a loss for words. "No?" Hong Yuye asked coldly. Jiang Hao lowered his head. He looked at the storage treasure and the 20,000 spirit stones. There were the pills and the spirit sword too. He could see the primordial spirit sword for 20,000 spirit stones. The pills would fetch him another 20,000. Altogether, it would be 60,000 spirit stones. He sighed inwardly. "Senior, your virtue is vast and encompassing, like the boundless ocean. How can one worry you with trivial matters of the world? I'll take care of this small matter." "Just that." Hong Yuye sat upright in her chair and smiled. It seemed that she didn't care about the items on the table. Jiang Hao was speechless. For a moment, he didn't know how to praise her. At this moment, Hong Yuye picked up the discarded magical treasure. She seemed a little disdainful. "How long has it been since you bought red azure tea?" She picked up the spirit sword. When it was unsheathed, the power flowed like a galaxy, but it felt somewhat restrained as if it were sealed. Clang! Hong Yuye lightly flicked her fair fingers against the sword. The sword's body instantly flowed like a galaxy, and a powerful force was released. Jiang Hao was surprised. This power was not much weaker than his own. It was a good sword. The price might be higher than he expected, especially when the power was unleashed. Putting the sword back on the table, Hong Yuye no longer paid attention to it. It seemed like ordinary scrap metal to her. Jiang Hao didn't dare hesitate. "It has been a while. Do you have any objections to buying it again now?" Hong Yuye asked calmly. But for some reason, there was an undercurrent in her calmness. It seemed that if the person before her refused, this undercurrent would completely engulf him. "No problem," Jiang Hao said and lowered his head. "Put the things away." Hong Yuye looked at the table. After some time, Jiang Hao put away the items and then brewed some tea. It was the Heavenly Sky Snowbud tea, which was worth 251 spirit stones. He had bought it earlier. Although the price had increased, he didn't know if Hong Yuye would like it. Jiang Hao felt quite nervous watching her take a sip. At that moment, Hong Yuye glanced at him. Her gaze revealed nothing, but it made him feel uneasy. However, nothing happened. Hong Yuye was still drinking her tea. She looked satisfied. Jiang Hao breathed a sigh of relief. He had fooled her. However, if he didn't get red azure tea soon, he would be in trouble. Although he had gained a lot this time, he couldn't sell the magical treasures and pills. He could only use 20,000 spirit stones for now. "The gathering is over?" Hong Yuye asked. "Yes." Jiang Hao nodded. Indeed, the gathering had taken place some time ago. Even Gui had changed her mind at the gathering about coming here. Tell me about the gathering, Hong Yuye said as she sipped her tea. Just as Jiang Hao was about to speak, he heard footsteps outside. Then, a young girl said, "Beast, are you home? There is some delicious food in the cafeteria. Let's go together. Since you have friends there, we can eat a bit more." Xiao Li. Jiang Hao was surprised. How did she come here? It was even more surprising that she could approach the area while Hong Yuye was there. Jiang Hao remembered that whenever Hong Yuye visited, no one seemed to be able to approach them. He sneakily glanced at the person drinking tea. She seemed indifferent about the matter. Chapter 486, Chapter 486, Poisoning the Demoness. Chapter 486, Poisoning the Demoness. Senior, it seems like someone is here, Jiang Hao said. Isn't that the dragon? Hong Yuye glanced at Jiang Hao. This made him somewhat worried. Xiao Li didn't know her place. She was just a young dragon. If she said something to offend Hong Yuye, the consequences would be dire. Beast. Xiao Li arrived at the door and looked inside, but she didn't see the spirit beast anywhere. Jiang Hao let her come and go as she pleased, so when she didn't see the spirit beast, she walked in. Beast. Xiao Li made her way to the hall. But soon, she saw Jiang Hao standing in the living room, and Hong Yuye sitting and drinking tea. Senior brother, senior sister, you're here too? Xiao Li looked surprised. She didn't fear Hong Yuye, but she recognized her. Jiang Hao was surprised. He had watched Hong Yuye carefully. When Xiao Li called her senior sister, she didn't look displeased. How did you come here? Hong Yuye asked softly. Xiao Li ran to Hong Yuye's side and took out a box of pastries tainted with the marsh gas. Here. This is for you, senior sister. Jiang Hao frowned. Pastries with poison for Hong Yuye? He broke into a cold sweat. He was worried about Xiao Li's life. The cafeteria is about to serve a meal, Jiang Hao said calmly. Only then did Xiao Li remember why she had come here. I'll go find the beast first. After saying that, she ran out without looking back. Jiang Hao breathed a sigh of relief. You're very worried about her safety. Hong Yuye picked up a piece of pastry. Xiao Li is still a child and speaks without thinking. I'm worried she might unknowingly offend you, senior, Jiang Hao said with his head down. You're always cautious, aren't you? Hong Yuye took a bite of the pastry. Jiang Hao kept his head down and didn't speak. Since he came to the Heavenly Note sect, he had always been cautious. He didn't want to provoke anyone powerful. That was the only way he could stay alive and grow. He entered the sect at the age of 5 and was now 31 years old. 26 years had passed. What cultivation realm are you in now? Hong Yuye asked. Early stage of the Golden Core realm. Golden Core realm is considered powerful among your peers, but you still seem so cautious. Hong Yuye picked up a second piece of pastry. Among his peers, he had already surpassed many people. Compared to some primordial spirit realm and soul ascension realm seniors, I'm still very weak. So, when will it end? Hong Yuye asked. Jiang Hao lowered his head. Perhaps when most of the people were no match for him. Or perhaps after he surpassed the person in front of him. Every day, he worked hard to become stronger. So, he would wait and try to keep a stable state of mind. Only then could he avoid dangers. I just want to live peacefully for now, Jiang Hao said. Hong Yuye looked at him and remained silent for a long time. Tell me about the gathering. What information did you gather? This time I have some news. Jiang Hao handed over the notebook. He talked about the Heavenly Spirit Tribe and the overseas seabed, but Hong Yuye wasn't interested in that. She also didn't care about Gui's friend. However, Jiang Hao Tian becoming a senior at the Astronomical Academy piqued her interest. Jiang Hao sat across from her. This seems suspicious. They probably want to improve their light and dust technique, since they've been ridiculed for it for too long. Now you can not only go to the Bright Moon sect but also to the Astronomical Academy, Hong Yuye said with a smile. I'd rather stay here and guard your flower, Senior Jiang Hao said helplessly. In fact, The Bright Moon sect might have been an option before, but after the discovery of the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl, it was no longer feasible for him. He would be exposed to Xing. As for the Astronomical Academy, they were interested in Jiang Haotian. Jiang Haotian was the person bestowed with vast power by Hong Yuye. He was someone whom countless strong individuals couldn't probe into. Jiang Hao wasn't exactly that person. So, the Astronomical Academy was not where he belonged. Hong Yuye chuckled. It seems like there's quite a bit of information about this. Heavenly King. The Heavenly King Hai Luo was a person infatuated with someone at the Foundation Establishment realm. He had established his footing in the Lawless Tower, but it seemed that he had been betrayed by someone dear to him. Perhaps that woman did it on purpose to save him, said Jiang Hao. Do you believe that? Hong Yuye asked. Jiang Hao lowered his head. In the cultivation world, most people were selfish. He liked to think the worst of people because that way he could sense danger in advance. That was how he avoided crises. That was why he didn't have real friends. Even the people he vaguely knew before had started avoiding him after the trouble with the Heavenly Joy Pavilion. They were all afraid of getting into trouble because of him. That was to be expected. He also made an effort to maintain his solitude, so he wouldn't burden others when he faced dangers. At the same time, he wouldn't be burdened by others. Besides all this, did you gain anything else? Hong Yuye handed the notebook back to Jiang Hao. Actually, there is something else. Jiang Hao talked about Dan Qingzi. I learned about Feng Hua from a senior at Azure Mountain. This person seems to have set his eyes on the heavenly fragrance Dao flower and belongs to the undercover elders of the Great Thousand God sect. He seeks people to cooperate with him in various trades. If the transaction is successful, he recruits those who trade with him and gives them the status of an honorary elder. Perhaps finding him will give us a lead regarding the stone tablets, and maybe we can even find out who assigned the mission to the Great Thousand God sect. It was the reason why he had sent Kai Tian as an undercover agent. A year had passed. He needed to find a way to pass a message to Kai Tian. For that, he needed Liu to owe him a favor. In the Milky Way Sea area in the overseas territory, various people gathered in the streets, which were bustling with activity. At this moment, Kai Tian was on the first floor of a large treasure shop. He looked at the spirit stones he had collected over the past few days and felt quite sentimental. He had never encountered so many spirit stones in his entire life. If the spirit stones were sufficient, he had a hope of defeating and killing his enemy. Senior Blood, there's a Golden Core Realm customer who needs your attention, said a woman as she walked into the shop. All right. Kai Tian nodded. He had changed his appearance and identity for several months now. He had left the eastern region for more than a year now. That person had never appeared, and he probably never would. He had entered the end of all things and changed his appearance, so even if someone was watching him, they wouldn't recognize him at all. Now, he was free. He was no longer constrained by that person. Kai Tian smiled. Sometimes he felt that person had been too confident. He thought that the person had acted mysteriously to make Kai Tian believe that he was powerful. But if he was powerful, why would he use a Golden Core Realm cultivator like him? He was sure that Jiang Hao pretended to be strong on the surface but was actually very weak. Chapter 487, Chapter 487, Probably Another Marriage Alliance. Chapter 487, Probably Another Marriage Alliance. After Hong Yuye left, Jiang Hao finally relaxed. He looked at his chest and noticed that the palm imprint was still there. He didn't know when the imprint would dissipate. It was too easy for it to fail. He just had to find a way to break off from the Heaven Extinction GU poison and have a relationship with other women. If that happened, the one-heart palm would completely lose its effect. Regardless of who it was, if one person in a relationship caused trouble, the palm technique wouldn't work. Thinking back to the records in the book he had read about it, he wondered if both the people in the relationship had issues. Maybe that was why the palm hadn't worked. So, they both lived in guilt and thought that they had let the other down. It wasn't impossible. As for what it would feel like to leave an imprint, he would never know. Hong Yuye would never agree. When you reach a certain level of strength and surpass worldly concerns, do you really care about physical intimacy? Jiang Hao was puzzled. He cared now because he was still an ordinary person. Even as a soul ascension realm cultivator, his state of mind was still human. He couldn't let go of it, no matter how much he convinced himself that he didn't need it. However, it was different for powerful individuals. Some formidable ancient experts didn't even have a gender. So, he had no idea how such existences would treat their partners and whether they would prioritize strength and benefits. In some ancient texts, there were few mentions of relationships between men and women. Most were about strength and personal interests. Even in personal biographies, they were rarely mentioned. In a grand scheme, relationships between men and women seemed somewhat insignificant. Perhaps those whose minds were preoccupied with such matters would find it difficult to become renowned immortal figures in the world. This time, when Hong Yuye left, she didn't leave anything behind. She neither told him to take care of her flower nor gave him anything, except that one mention of red azure tea. That was a somewhat troublesome matter. Firstly, it required spending 10,000 spirit stones. For him, that was a huge expense. Fortunately, he was now at the early stage of the Golden Core realm, and buying it once wouldn't attract too much scrutiny. This was the change in status brought about by an increase in the cultivation realm. The Golden Core realm cultivators were generally assumed to have a lot of spirit stones. However, the Golden Core realm cultivators weren't any better off than the Foundation Establishment realm cultivators. The same applied to Primordial Spirit realm and Soul Ascension realm cultivators. Jiang Hao had experienced this. Most of the time he was quite poor. It was just by chance that some people left behind a few things, which gave him quite a few spirit stones. Now, he had approximately 36,500 spirit stones. After deducting 2,500 he owed to the Law Enforcement Hall, he only had the 2,500 owed to the Peak Enforcement Peak. He had 34,000 left. His task involved finding someone in Azure Mountain, but unfortunately, he hadn't had the time to find out more about the person. He had his own priority. He was pretty laid back about it. If he could do it along the way, all the better. However, if he couldn't, he didn't think much about it. In that way, he lost 2,500 spirit stones to the Law Enforcement Hall. Fortunately, he still had quite a few spirit stones left for now. Even if he lost 10,000, he still had more than 20,000. Finally, Dan Qing's matter has come to an end. I obtained a clue about Feng Hua, but unfortunately, I couldn't find him. Thankfully, this matter is not urgent. Regarding the tasks given by Hong Yuye, he didn't dare to draw conclusions too quickly. It involved many factors. First and foremost, the person concerned was too powerful. It wouldn't do to meet them unprepared. Even if Hong Yuye were to take action, he could face danger. When powerful individuals clashed, the aftermath was something that would impact him too. Apart from that, there was also Yin Wei and the situation overseas. Yin Wei hasn't appeared till now. I wonder what he's waiting for. I don't know when someone from overseas will come to investigate senior sister Insha's matter. As for other things, he didn't need to worry about them for the time being. Senior brother Chen Chen was also acting strange. After the last time, he hadn't targeted Jiang Hao again. It seemed as if there had been no grievances at all, as if everything about the Bloodwish path had also stopped after the incident. Perhaps his goal had already been achieved. In any case, there wouldn't be any trouble for the time being. Is this a rare period of peace? For Jiang Hao, this was undoubtedly a good thing. He just didn't know how long this peace would last. After taking a break for a while, he could try to buy red azure tea. For now, he couldn't do it. He needed everyone to know that he had reached the Golden Core realm before making the purchase. That way, they would think it was normal. At the southern border, Baizhu walked into a large courtyard. There were some guards here, but they were all ordinary people. Occasionally, there were a few with lifeblood refinement realm cultivation. There was a pool and a rock garden in the courtyard, and the people living here were either rich or noble. In the middle, a woman paced anxiously. She sighed helplessly. Unlike the guards, she was in the primordial spirit realm. Auntie Qiao, What's causing you a headache? Baiju walked in wearing a pink skirt. Her long hair flowed down her back. Your Highness, you're back, Auntie Qiao said with joy upon seeing Baiju. She hurriedly approached and checked her before heaving a sigh of relief. You've been gone for more than 10 years. I almost told them that I couldn't keep an eye on you, Auntie Qiao said indignantly. Baiju tucked her hair behind her ears and smiled. There are so many princesses. Surely, not everyone is paying attention to me. Not many princesses can live to over 300 years old. Auntie Qiao stopped talking when she saw Baiju's fierce gaze. Have you been stationed at the Jeonju prefecture all along? Baiju looked around. Yes. After the last letter that asked us to come to the southern border, we've been here all along. But why stay on the border? Auntie Qiao was puzzled. Because the southern part could be destroyed in an instant, Baiju said casually. Auntie Qiao didn't pay attention to it. She took it as a joke. Princess, in all these years, did you find someone? Why can't I travel the south alone? You don't have an aura of cultivation. Maybe it's just that you can't see it. After hesitating, Auntie Qiao suddenly said, Princess, are you worried about the 500-year lifespan limit? Baiju still maintained her soft smile. Actually, I've never understood why the royal family has a 500-year lifespan. Most of the royal family members lacked cultivation talent, yet they had extremely long lifespans. This was innate. This was a question Auntie Qiao had no answer to. She changed the topic. Princess, it's good that you're back. His Majesty sent a letter and asked you to return. Just me or everyone? Baiju asked. Everyone. Auntie Qiao sighed. I guess it's another marriage alliance, Baiju said indifferently. Probably. Auntie Qiao nodded. I have to go back again. There are so many rules in the imperial city, Baiju said helplessly. By the way, there's news from the imperial city. Your elder brother, Prince Baiyu, has completed the Golden Core realm and entered the primordial spirit realm. Auntie Qiao smiled. Big brother managed to reach the primordial spirit realm? That means he can live for more than 1,000 years. Baiju walked by the lake. She was surprised by the news. What about my eldest brother? No news yet, Auntie Qiao said. That's expected. My eldest brother might not even know about my existence. Even if he did, he wouldn't care. For him, my lifespan isn't even enough for a trip outside. Baiju placed her hands behind her back and smiled. She didn't care about being ignored by her siblings. Chapter 488, Chapter 488, More Spirit Stones, the better. Chapter 488, More Spirit Stones, the better. After the affair with Dan Qingzi, Jiang Hao finally enjoyed a peaceful month within the sect. In early July, he arrived at the Snow Lotus Pavilion. Senior brother, what would you like to buy? The woman at the desk asked. The vendors here would occasionally change. Meeting the same one from last time was pretty rare. After all, there were quite a few of them. I'd like to buy some tea leaves, Jiang Hao said. Tea leaves? The vendor smiled. Senior brother, were you the one who asked about red azure tea before? Jiang Hao was puzzled. He had asked about it once. I was the one who answered you last time. Not many people ask about it, so I remember you, the woman said with a smile. Are you planning to buy it as a gift? Besides red azure tea, we have other high-quality tea leaves that I can introduce you to. What is the current price of red azure tea? Jiang Hao asked. The price remains the same. It's still 10,000 spirit stones, said the vendor with a perfect smile. Would you like to take a look? Although red azure tea can't be touched at will, we can allow you to look. Also, there are some other good tea leaves here if you prefer. Sure. Let's take a look, Jiang Hao said. Shortly after, in the tea room, Jiang Hao waited for the woman to bring the tea. Some tea leaves were quite expensive, and they weren't left on display. Senior brother, take a look at this first, said the woman as she took out other tea leaves too. No. I just want to see red azure tea first. All right, the vendor smiled. A characteristic trait of red azure tea is the red tips on the tea leaves. The woman opened the box. The red tips were striking, and the tea was surrounded by a dense spiritual energy. It was of good quality. Jiang Hao nodded. It was better than what he had bought before, but slightly inferior to what he had found in the Bright Moon sect. 10,000 spirit stones? Jiang Hao asked. Yes. It is suitable for giving as a gift, but the price is a bit high, said the woman as she closed the box. Then, she began to introduce other tea leaves. Senior brother, you can take a look at this. I'll take this one, Jiang Hao suddenly said. This one? The vendor was quite surprised. Senior brother, you can learn more about it before making a decision. That's all right. I want red azure tea, Jiang Hao said. Huh? The vendor was stunned. She felt like she had misheard. Senior brother, are you saying that you want to buy red azure tea? Yes. Jiang Hao nodded. Upon hearing this, the vendor was astonished. Senior brother, please have a seat, and I'll pour you a cup of tea. Senior brother, take care. The vendor even saw him off as he left. Having spirit stones was a really good thing, especially when buying expensive items. However, he spent spirit stones just too quickly. Luckily, he didn't need them for cultivation, or he'd be even more lacking. He had intended to set up a stall. As he passed through the streets, he saw a formation. This made him think about upgrading the formation in his courtyard, but Hong Yuye hadn't given him a new formation diagram, and neither had Elder Baiji. Buying it on his own was a bit too expensive. Just the materials alone would cost a few thousand spirit stones, and he had to set it up himself. In the end, he bought a book named 6 Golden Core Talismans. After that, he set up his stall for a while. The sales were much lower. After the sect's recuperation, the demand had decreased. It was more difficult to sell things now. When he was about to close the stall and leave, a customer suddenly arrived. Jiang Hao looked at him in surprise. The person was wearing the sect's attire, had a dark complexion, and appeared to be in the 9th stage of the lifeblood refinement realm. But in reality, he was at the golden core realm. Jiang Hao looked around. He didn't see others like the person who had just arrived. He used the daily appraisal ability. He is here to investigate the people who appeared at the bottom of the sea and has assumed the identity of a 9th stage lifeblood refinement realm cultivator to join the Heavenly Note sect. He is currently going around the stalls and purchasing things while hoping to find some clues from the vendors. Someone from overseas has finally come. Jiang Hao wasn't surprised. However, this method of ionins the sect was similar to his. Does everyone think like this? If that's the case, he shouldn't do it like this next time. It was too conspicuous. However, when recruiting disciples, it was indeed the best way to enter the sect. Even the immortal sects had a high possibility of being able to enter other sects. Senior brother, how much is the Divine Walk talisman? Gongxin asked. Jiang Hao frowned. This person wasn't really playing his part well. As a lifeblood refinement realm cultivator, he shouldn't be able to afford it. Showing too many spirit stones to buy talismans for some in the lower cultivation realm wasn't normal. 5 for 1 spirit stone, Jiang Hao said. How about 6 pieces? I just joined the sect, so I don't have many spirit stones, Gongxin said. Jiang Hao agreed. After all, not many people bought those talismans. Being able to sell them was quite good. By the way, do our sect members wear black robes? Gongxin asked. I saw some sect disciples in black robes outside, which is why I wanted to join the Heavenly Note sect. They're really powerful. Black robes. Jiang Hao shook his head. 6 haven't seen them. In fact, only those under Elder Baiji wore black robes, and most of them worked at the Lawless Tower. Ordinary disciples didn't wear them. The person could ask around, but he wouldn't get much information on Sea Fog Cave. He paid the spirit stones and then didn't linger. It seemed like he had just asked casually about the robes. After a while, Jiang Hao closed his stall and went to the task hall. The senior sister, who was at the reception, smiled at him. Junior brother, failed another mission again? There's still a month left. You still have a chance to complete it. Jiang Hao was speechless. In the end, he paid 1,000 spirit stones and left behind a balance of 1,500 spirit stones to be paid within the next 3 months. When he returned to his courtyard, he saw that the peach tree was beginning to blossom. In a month or two, it would bear fruit. The spirit beast was clinging to the bamboo beside it as it nibbled on the leaves. "What are you doing?" Jiang Hao was surprised. "Eating bamboo leaves. It tastes better than carrots." "Master, would you like to?" "No, thank you." Jiang Hao shook his head. The spirit beast was really strange sometimes. "Master, I noticed something lately," the beast said as it hung upside down from a branch. "What is it?" Jiang Hao sat down. "You haven't tied me up for a while now. When will you tie me up again, master?" asked the beast expectantly. Jiang Hao was speechless. He sighed. He had no spirit stones to do that. Ignoring the rabbit, Jiang Hao got up and went into his house. He read the book he had just bought on talismans to learn something new. At the sea fog cave, Baiji arrived at the entrance. "What queue going on? We've caught a strange thing. We tried to transport it out, but its vitality was disappearing, so we had to ask you to come, Elder Baiji," said a black-robed woman. "Can you communicate with it?" Baiji asked. "Yes, but it refuses to respond," said the black-robed woman. Baiji nodded without asking anything further and decided to take a look. Shortly after, they passed by the stone tablet and arrived at the edge of the fog. They found tentacles there. These tentacles were controlled by a spell. The tentacles originated from a huge head, which looked withered and wrinkled. It seemed like the tentacles made up its beard and eyebrows. Baiji was astonished. She had never seen anything like this before. There was no record of such a creature in the bestiary. Chapter 489, Chapter 489, Finding a Powerful Mistress. Chapter 489, Finding a Powerful Mistress. Baiji walked in front of the creature and locked eyes with it. She could see its body and its eyes, but its arms and legs had turned into tentacles. The number of tentacles was more than the normal number of limbs. The creature stood about 2 meters tall. It was much larger than an average person. This was a strange monster, most likely from the depths of the sea. "Can you understand what I'm saying?" Baiji asked. The creature just looked at her with cold eyes. "Your strength is a bit weak. Were you the one trapping people at the edge of the fog?" Baiji asked again. However, the creature still looked at her coldly and didn't utter a word. It didn't understand her. "If you communicate well, I can release your restraints. If you answer the questions, I can send you back to the sea fog," Baiji said. The creature seemed to hesitate. Baiji could tell that it could understand her. "If you have any requests, you can mention them too," she said. "If you're worried that we won't keep our word, you can propose something that can be fulfilled immediately." "Blood. Flesh," said a hoarse voice. Baiji smiled. She wasn't afraid that the creature would make demands. She was only worried that it might refuse to speak. Early the next morning, Jiang Hao put away the 7 forms of Heavenly Blade. He had understood the 4th form for a while now, but unfortunately, he couldn't modify it as he wished. He could only continue to comprehend it. Recently, he also delved into the Bloodwish path, which was indeed a terrifying cultivation technique. If one's life was long enough, one could become stronger to a certain point. As for the limit, Jiang Hao didn't know what it was. After all, he was clueless about the realm after return to Void. It's July, so it should be about time. In a few more months, he could advance in his cultivation realm. He wasn't there yet. It should be achievable by the end of the year. After reaching the late stage of the Soul Ascension realm, he could compete with senior brother Bai Yi. Senior brother Bai Yi was a true disciple of the Cliff of Broken Hearts. Senior brother Dongfang didn't seem to be in the normal order of seniority. After all, he was a remnant of the old branch. But senior brother Bai Yi was so strong that he was one of the top disciples. He didn't know if he ranked 7th or 4th. On the 5th rank was senior sister Yi Yaqing. The 6th was senior sister Wei Yi Sai. Senior sister Yi was in the late stage of the Soul Ascension realm. If senior brother Bai Yi wasn't ranked behind them, then he must be stronger. Jiang Hao suddenly remembered that the competition for the top disciples had already ended, and no one had emerged as the new 10th top disciple. Manlong wasn't allowed to participate. Liu Xingchen is back, and with his peak primordial spirit realm, he could become the next top disciple. Unfortunately, he didn't want to participate. Becoming a top disciple was more boring for him than it was now. Liu Xingchen wasn't lacking in resources. If he was, he wouldn't have ever left the Clear Sky School. Everything he did was out of boredom. After packing up, Jiang Hao went to the courtyard. For some reason, the beast got up early today and stood motionless in front of the heavenly fragrance Dao flower. "What are you doing?" Jiang Hao asked. "Master, haven't you noticed that the flower has been disrespecting me lately? It's not growing more leaves. Isn't disrespect a normal part of your life now?" Jiang Hao asked. The beast turned to Jiang Hao and said seriously, "Master, you should try a bit harder." Jiang Hao chuckled and walked out. The spirit beast hurriedly followed. "How about finding a powerful female companion? That way, you can work a little less." Jiang Hao chose to ignore the beast. The peaceful days continued for another month. He thought he could be at peace at least until the end of the year. But one day, he received another message from Elder Baiji. She asked him to the Sea Fog Cave. This message made Jiang Hao break into a cold sweat. That place wasn't a good place. The Sea Fog Cave was related to the Heavenly Spirit Tribe, which in turn was related to the Saint Bandits. Recently, a member of Saint Bandits, Yin Wei, had targeted him. Going to the Sea Fog Cave gave him the feeling of entering a tiger's den. But Elder Baiji's order had to be followed. He made his way to the Sea Fog Cave after some preparations. This time he went alone, so it was a bit safer than before. After all, there were no other juniors he had to worry about. He didn't quite understand why he was asked to come to the Sea Fog Cave. When he arrived, he saw a black-robed senior standing at the entrance. "Junior brother Jiang," she said in greeting. "Hello, senior sister," Jiang Hao bowed. He had seen this senior a few times before, but they had rarely talked. "Follow me, junior brother." The black-robed senior didn't waste any time and led him inside. They walked to the depths of the Sea Fog Cave. The further they went, the more Jiang Hao felt uneasy. He didn't sense anything around, so it might only be his mind playing tricks on him. Luckily, he had the golden ring. If something happened, he could escape. "Actually, the reason I called you here this time is the same as before," the black-robed woman said in hesitation. "We've captured a strange creature that can communicate but knows very little. We can't be sure if it's lying, so we had to ask you to take a look." Jiang Hao's abilities were evident, and his contributions in dealing with the captives were seen by everyone. Bringing him in might have a certain chance of solving the problem. "Senior sister, you're too kind. I just got lucky last time. I can't compare to the other seniors," said Jiang Hao humbly. He was puzzled. They caught a strange creature. What could it be? Shortly after, he arrived at the edge of the fog and saw a weak monster. The creature had many tentacles and looked weary and resentful. From a distance, it looked somewhat like an octopus, but up close, it resembled a human somehow. Its tentacles acted like hands and feet. "What is this?" Jiang Hao was surprised. "We caught it from inside the Sea Fog Cave," the black-robed senior said. "It's not very strong, but it's extremely fast in the sea fog, so it took quite a bit of effort to catch it." "Is this the creature that was in the sea fog before?" Jiang Hao asked. The tentacles didn't seem to match. The size of the creature was also different. The tentacles he had cut off were much thicker than this. The creature was indeed weak. At that time, he could cut off the tentacles with a single strike by using the power of Foundation Establishment Realm. He is not the same one. The tentacles back then probably came from deeper within. "We cannot trace them for now," the black-robed woman said as she shook her head. "But this creature seemed to be trapped, so it's only by coincidence that we caught him. Trying to find a second one is exceptionally difficult. We might not be able to find another at all." Jiang Hao nodded but was still unsure why he was called. "They wanted you to see if you can extract more information from it. So far, we only know about the giant tentacles inside, which are extremely fast. We have no information about what lies deeper, the origin of the tentacles. It's something we have never seen, the black-robed woman said. Apart from that, we can confirm that it likes blood and flesh. Absorbing them makes its body more agile. It perhaps relies on flesh and blood to become stronger. Chapter 490, Calling her sister-in-law. Chapter 490, Calling her sister-in-law. Staring at the peculiar monster in front of him, Jiang Hao was quite surprised. It was the first time he had seen such a strange monster. In reality, he was very wary of the sea fog cave, and the things inside were no exception. After giving a rough explanation, the people around him stepped back. Now, only Jiang Hao and the monster were left facing each other. The other creature looked wary. Jiang Hao silently appraised the creature. Jiang Hao remained silent. The appraisal didn't reveal much, but he discovered the creature's capabilities. It could discern directions and find lost individuals. But what exactly was inside the sea fog cave? There was no information about it at all. The creature from before was the same. He had no information about it. Are you also trying to deceive me with sweet words? A deep voice echoed in Jiang Hao's mind. It was the voice of the creature, Ajah. Having a name indicates that the creature has a race and language. If it were just a simple sea creature, it wouldn't have a name. It might have no concept of what a name was. It seems I won't get more information from you. Jiang Hao sighed. He didn't plan to get involved in this matter. In his view, the sea fog cave was extremely dangerous, and once he got involved, he might have to enter the cave. There was no need to throw himself into the fire. Without saying more, Jiang Hao turned and left. Although the woman in the black robe was disappointed, she still escorted him to the entrance of the cave. I have let you down, senior sister, Jiang Hao said apologetically. Junior brother, you must be joking. We are the ones who caused you trouble. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Jiang Hao turned and left. At this moment, a man and a woman happened to pass by him and entered the cave. The man was unremarkable, but the woman kept her eyes closed for some reason. Without much thought, he walked straight on. At this moment, the two of them noticed Jiang Hao. Why is he here? He has even reached the Golden Core realm. Is the blood wish path that strong? Whispered the man. If the rumors are true, he might not live much longer in the Golden Core realm, the woman said with her eyes still closed. Anyway, we shouldn't pay much attention to other people's choices. Perhaps we'll find out more about him next time. By then, he might die under the blood wish path. Alright, let's focus on the sea fog cave for now. This seems more troublesome. These two people were the ones who were on guard outside Jiang Hao's courtyard before. Back at his residence, Jiang Hao sighed. The sea fog cave seemed very complicated, and it had changed since the Saint Bandits became active. He was unsure if that place was important for the Saint Bandits. But the glimpses he had seen earlier indicated that the place was definitely not safe for ordinary people. I should focus on advancing my cultivation realm. With sufficient cultivation, many dangers would become manageable. Jiang Hao calculated the spirit stones he had now. A total of 24,366. The 1,500 spirit stones for the task hall had also been settled. In addition, there were many treasures and pills that he couldn't sell yet. There was a primordial soul realm halberd, a soul ascension realm spirit sword, a pile of masks, many primordial soul realm and soul ascension realm pills, and a primordial soul realm burning blood pill. Once all were sold, he would become wealthy. Unfortunately, he didn't dare to sell them so casually in the sect. He could only try to sell the 2 heavenly rejuvenation pills. Organizing all of this, Jiang Hao took out the 6 Golden Core Talismans book. Recently, he had learned about the first talisman, the Heavenly Sword Talisman. It was an advanced form of the 100,000 Swords Talisman. At first, he thought of making the Million Divine Swords Talismans. However, he let go of that idea because it wasn't easy to make. It was too demanding. After learning about it, Jiang Hao began to practice. Even though he had already reached the Soul Ascension realm, he needed a long time to improve his success rate. In 1 month, he had progressed from a success rate of 2 out of 10 to 6 or 7 out of 10. His progress was already fast. Given some more time, there might not be any failures at all. During this month of practice, he used the materials he had purchased from the Bright Moon sect previously, so he didn't need to spend his spirit stones. In early September, the peach tree had started to bear fruits. It wouldn't be long before they matured. Jiang Hao took a moment to appraise them. It would take 3 years for another incarnation. There were 4 more incarnations remaining. The sea fog cave didn't bother him anymore. There was no news from that place for now. These days went by relatively peacefully. However, after advancing to the Golden Core realm, some Golden Core cultivators seemed to look at him unfavorably. In their eyes, he had advanced because of the Bloodwish path, and they were not very pleased. At the same time, they looked down on him a bit. Perhaps some conflicts would arise due to these differences. It was unavoidable. Seeing someone of the same cultivation realm with inferior talent, they would naturally feel threatened. He was waiting for the conflict to start. Only after that, things could settle down. Otherwise, staring at him and harboring more and more resentment was not a good thing. At noon, as he thought about the Golden Core realm cultivators who would target him, he got a call for another gathering. I can finally find out what happened to the Heavenly King Hai Luo. Although there were many speculations, most of them weren't true. He found the spirit beast and Xiao Li under the peach tree. They seemed to be waiting for the fruits to ripen. Xiao Li nervously held the spirit beast when she saw Jiang Hao. Senior brother Jiang. "It isn't ripe yet," said Jiang Hao. After that, he didn't pay attention to them and walked inside. The beast sighed. "Master is so popular with women, but why doesn't he find a companion? Should I look for a few? Isn't there a senior sister already?" Xiao Li asked in confusion. "I felt their auras blend together. One is not enough." "What if she doesn't respect us?" the beast said. "But aren't you very influential?" Xiao Li asked. "Yeah. But your influence is small," the beast said seriously. "We definitely need to find a suitable companion for Master. Then, should I call her sister-in-law next time instead of senior sister?" Xiao Li asked earnestly. "That makes sense. Then, next time, I'll call her sister-in-law too." The beast nodded. "Then, are we still looking for a new sister-in-law?" "Of course, we are." Jiang Hao stood on the balcony and listened to their discussion. He had an urge to chase them away. The beast was already in danger in front of Hong Yuye. But Xiao Li was different. Xiao Li could indeed talk with Hong Yuye. Moreover, she was an honest child. If she said she would call Hong Yuye that, she would actually do it. He didn't know if Hong Yuye would do anything to Xiao Li, but it was better to be cautious. But how was he going to explain it to Xiao Li? In the end, Jiang Hao decided to put it off and explain it to her some other day. She could eat and do whatever she liked, but she had to be careful with her words. One sentence could possibly jeopardize the lives of both of them. Chapter 491. Chapter 491. It's time for Kai Tian to fulfill his role. Chapter 491. It's time for Kai Tian to fulfill his role. Jiang Hao shook his head and sighed. He no longer paid attention to the two below. If this continued, the beast might not live long. It had a big reputation and a tough life. In the cultivation world, which spirit pet survived after repeated attacks from Hong Yuye? Which spirit pet could face powerful adversaries several times and still come out unscathed? This spirit beast was quite something. Compared to the beast, Xiao Li might be fine. She had seen Hong Yuye multiple times and remained unharmed. Back in his room, Jiang Hao began to plan for tonight's gathering. Aside from the possibility of Gui asking him some questions, he wouldn't need to speak much. But he doubted he could answer Gui's questions because Hong Yuye hadn't explained anything to him. His knowledge was insufficient. At that time, he could only remain silent and look toward Senior Dan Yuan. That way, the problem would be resolved. Although he pretended to be mysterious and powerful during the gathering, he was still just an ordinary member. The most beneficial and knowledgeable person was still the initiator of the gathering, Senior Dan Yuan. After waiting for some time, he heard no sound from the courtyard. Xiao Li must have gone to eat. Jiang Hao sat cross-legged and reviewed the content of the last gathering, while also recalling his experiences to determine what could be said. Most importantly, he couldn't say anything that would affect the impression of himself that he left at the gathering. At midnight, in the southern Nanyuan capital, Qiao Yi stood guard at the door. At this moment, someone arrived from outside. It was a middle-aged general who was in the primordial spirit realm. "Is the princess resting?" he asked as he looked at the inner part of their courtyard. "What else would she be doing?" Qiao Yi frowned and said in a low voice. "General Lin, why are you here so late? Is there something wrong?" "I came to remind you out of goodwill. Princess Baizhu is over 300 years old, and her remaining lifespan is not much. If she doesn't get married soon, her position in the imperial city will plummet," General Lin said with a smile. "Whether the princess gets married or not is her business and has nothing to do with you," Qiao Yi said coldly. "I actually have a candidate. Perhaps. Get out." At this moment, the aura of the primordial spirit realm surged. General Lin didn't say much and turned to leave. Qiao Yi sighed as she watched him leave. What General Lin said was not entirely false, but Princess Baizhu's older brothers were not ordinary princes, especially her eldest brother. His status and position were very high, mainly because of his power. Because of that, not many people tried to pressure her. But if the emperor had decided, then no one could do anything. Finally, she sighed again. "I wonder how long the princess can stay free." When she thought about it carefully, Princess Baizhu had increased her lifespan by 100 years, and the imperial city had not pressured her. But many people still looked at her indignantly. At that moment, Princess Baizhu had already entered the stone tablet in her room. The people present were Senior Dan Yuan and the 4 regular members. After exchanging greetings with Senior Dan Yuan, they sat down cross-legged on the floor. Baizhu hesitated for a moment but did not ask any cultivation questions. No one else had any questions. She was quite curious. Did Jing really have no questions at all? "Do you have any information about the Saint Bandits?" Senior Dan Yuan asked. The Saint Bandits were very special. Baizhu had looked up a lot of information and asked many people, but unfortunately, she hadn't gained much. "I searched for information about the Heavenly Spirit Tribe and found Summitming strange. It seems Tnat Tneen appearance or Tneen Saint Bandits come clear with the decline of the Heavenly Spirit Tribe," Xing said. "That is indeed the case, but the details are not clear enough," Senior Dan Yuan said. After that, no one had anything to contribute. There was no information about the Heavenly Fragrance Dao flower either. Then came the regular trading session. "I have already informed the friend about the transfer and transmutation of the curse. Is there anything I can do for you, friend Jing?" Gui asked. Jiang Hao looked toward her. He had considered this question before entering the stone tablet. "Please help me curse someone." At present, what he needed most was to find Kai Tian. But Gui wasn't overseas. It wasn't suitable to ask her about it. He couldn't ask for other things, and asking her to teach him curses was useless. Hong Yuye didn't like cursed things. He had been warned before. He couldn't risk it again. "Curse who?" Gui, or rather Baizhu, asked. "Yin Wei in the Heavenly Note sect," Jiang Hao said. "Is that all?" "That's all." After a moment of silence, Gui said, "What curse do you want?" "Anything is fine," Jiang Hao said. "I can't guarantee its effectiveness," Gui said. Jiang Hao nodded and didn't say anything further. The success rate was indeed low, but if it had some effect, that would be sufficient. Even if it can hinder his progress in cultivation by a bit, it would be fine. In any case, suppressing him a bit would be good, especially since this person had set his sights on him. "I have a task," Liu said. "I want to know how the Heavenly Note sect entered the depths of the sea. Any related clues will do." Jiang Hao lowered his head and thought about it. The secret of the sea fog cave would be out sooner or later. If the Heavenly Note sect felt helpless, they would reveal the truth anyway. Elder Baizhi definitely had such courage. Since that was the case, he could conveniently use this opportunity, and he could also use Liu's influence to find out more. Previously, He was hesitant to mention the sea fog cave because he was afraid of being tied to it. Now, he had no worries. With that, Kai Tian's issue could also be solved smoothly. Have you seen anything lately? Xing asked. I saw tentacles. Tentacles inscribed with text. Some sort of scriptures, said Liu. It's because of the sea fog cave, Jiang Hao said without hesitation. This sudden statement surprised everyone. The Heavenly Note sect's sea fog cave, Jiang Hao said. Are you suggesting, friend Jing, that people from the Heavenly Note sect entered the sea through the sea fog cave? Liu asked. Jiang Hao nodded. A large amount of blood and flesh might reveal some clues. This piece of information is enough to encourage overseas individuals to join the exploration of the sea fog cave. This also conveniently provided a chance to rescue those trapped inside. Is there anything you need, friend Jing? Liu asked. Jing's words in the gathering carried weight. Since he had said it, the others believed that it was likely the truth. Please help me find someone overseas to deliver a message, said Jiang Hao. It's time for Kai Tian to hold up his end of the bargain. If he delayed it any further, Kai Tian would either attack him or get rid of him. That was how a normal cultivator did things, especially someone whose mind was twisted by hatred and tragedy. Kai Tian wouldn't just obediently fulfill his part of the deal. Who is this person? Liu asked. Jiang Hao looked at Senior Dan Yuan. At this moment, the stone slab appeared in front of both of them. Kai Tian's name was passed on, along with an accompanying message. This message would make Kai Tian understand that he couldn't escape from Jiang Hao's grasp. That was enough for now. He could leave it at that for now. When Hong Yuye pressed him for information, he could see if Kai Tian had found out anything. Chapter 492, The Fate of Heavenly King Hai Luo. Chapter 492, The Fate of Heavenly King Hai Luo. The purpose of Kai Tian was not necessarily for him to gather enough information. Jiang Hao needed to use him as an excuse when there was no progress. That way, he would have something to report to Hong Yuye. But isn't this task too ordinary? It's just to find the person and pass on the message, said Liu. Jiang Hao smiled. You'll know when you look for him. Kai Tian was on guard against him, so it wouldn't be easy to find him. Liu didn't say much and just nodded. I need a flood dragon. Preferably, a flood dragon from the depths of the sea, Xing said. I might have some clues. Liu thought for a moment and said, is there a specific requirement? No, but it needs to be a regular flood dragon, and it has to be alive, Xing said. All right, I should have some information in a while, Liu said. Jiang Hao didn't know what Xing needed the dragon for, but these people often had other missions. He just couldn't be involved in many of them. Currently, they only sought him out if they had a mission in the vicinity of the Heavenly Note sect. For other regions, they would ask someone who was nearby. After the transactions concluded, Gui smiled. I heard that the Southern Imperial City is about to arrange a marriage and seems to have invited people from various sects. I don't know why it's such a grand occasion. Southern Imperial City? Jiang Hao lowered his head in thought. The southern region was vast and there was an imperial city somewhere. However, he had never seen it, and only a few people ever talked about it. The Heavenly Note sect was in the farthest south, so it was difficult for the imperial city's influence to reach there. They could manage various cities, but sects were beyond their reach. However, this did not mean that the imperial city was weak. Some books recorded the legend of the royal family. In any case, being able to establish order in the imperial city without the help of the sects wasn't a small thing. He had never heard of such a thing as a marriage alliance. The royal family in the southern region seems to be getting close to the Saint Bandits. Be careful if you go there, Dan Yuan said suddenly. This surprised everyone. So, there were Saint Bandits in the imperial city. They really had people everywhere. The Saint Bandits claimed to be able to seize talents and probably could also bestow talents upon others. Regardless of province, there were many people in need of their services, and their agents were numerous in these places. I just realized what an extraordinary genius actually is, said Xing the disciple with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment is about to advance to the Golden Core realm. The speed of progress is unbelievable. Everyone was stunned. It had only been a little over a year. She was already about to advance to Golden Core Realm in about 2 years. At this rate, how much faster will she be in the future? Gui asked. She's about 20 years old now, right? 2 years for Golden Core Realm. If she doubles her progress, she'll be at Primordial Spirit Realm at 24. She would be at the Soul Ascension Realm at 32 and return to Void Realm at 48. She can reach the Immortal Ascension Realm before she's 200 years old. That's quite unbelievable. Liu was astonished. Jiang Hao was also amazed. This speed was almost the same as his. The Heavenly Dao Foundation establishment was indeed remarkable. It wouldn't be easy for Chu Chuan to catch up. At least in the early stages, there was no hope, but it depended on whether there would be an opportunity in the later stages. According to Hong Yuye, what mattered in the later stages was not talent but the heart of the person. Heavenly Dao Foundation establishment is about a person of great luck, so rapid progress is inevitable, Dan Yuan said. Jiang Hao lowered his head. If it were known that his progress exceeded that of someone with the Heavenly Dao Foundation establishment, he wondered what would happen. This was the reason he dared not reveal it. It seemed a little like a fantasy tale. It would bring fatal consequences. Things have been quite lively overseas lately. Hai Luo, the Heavenly King, has returned. With the support of other kings, he took control of his forces. Not only that, but he also besieged Miao Anxian. And then? Gui was curious. Miao Anxian is his beloved, isn't she? Did he really make an attempt on her life? Jiang Hao listened quietly. He also wanted to know the final outcome. Perhaps the two of them would still end up together. The situation is a bit complicated. It's known that Hai Luo, the Heavenly King, returned and Miao Anxian's power was stripped from her. She then fled. It seems that Hai Luo only wanted to confront her and seek an explanation. But she didn't see it that way. In the end, Miao Anxian was chased to the Abyssal Sea, which is a perilous place. She looked at Hai Luo, who caught up to her, and without a second thought, she jumped in. She probably didn't survive. Hai Luo didn't jump in after her? Jiang Hao wanted to ask, but he didn't utter a word. King Hai Luo didn't jump after her even though she was his lover? Gui asked. Jiang Hao increasingly felt that the gathering couldn't do without Gui at all. No, he just stood there in a daze. Liu shook his head. He is one of the 12 Heavenly Kings. Even if she is his lover, he can't afford to be swayed by her and abandon everything. Otherwise, how could he establish himself overseas and become one of the 12 Heavenly Kings? Is that how it ended? Gui asked. I think so. The future is uncertain. Because the Heavenly King's strength seems to have been seriously damaged, it's hard to say if he can maintain his position as one of the 12 Heavenly Kings for long. But with Miao Anxian, it's probably a done deal, Liu said. Jiang Hao sighed inwardly. He wondered what Hai Luo was feeling right now. Perhaps he would say, I was just fooling around, and you all took it seriously. Unfortunately, it was hard to know for sure. After talking for a while, Jiang Hao fell silent. Every time it came to an exchange, he seemed to be non-existent. No topic could interest him. The only thing he could report on was the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl, but unfortunately, apart from the earlier changes, there had been no further developments. After leaving the gathering, Jiang Hao breathed a sigh of relief and took out his notebook to write everything down. This time, there wasn't much to write. The royal family in the southern region was planning a marriage alliance. The Saint Bandits might make contact with them. He had asked Gui to curse Yin Wei. He informed Liu about the Sea Fog Cave and asked him to find Kai Tian and deliver a message. The rest was about Hai Luo's matter that didn't need any extra attention. Senior Dan Yuan also didn't have tasks to assign them. Jiang Hao put away the book and realized that there wasn't much for him to do lately. He only needed to wait. Perfect. I can focus on my cultivation. 2 months later, in early November, many overseas individuals visited the Heavenly Note sect to discuss cooperation on some matters. After 3 days of discussions, Elder Baiji agreed to their proposal. Both sides cooperated with the Sea Fog Cave as the common ground. Jiang Hao didn't know the details. Even Liu Xingchen knew very little about it. But the most obvious change was that there were many foreigners in the sect, and occasional conflicts would arise. The Heavenly Note sect was a demonic sect, and there were quite a few people from overseas, so there always were some conflicts due to different opinions. Moreover, the overseas people seemed to be a bit arrogant and looked down on the Heavenly Note sect. Heavenly Sword Talisman? The quality of your Heavenly Sword Talisman is a bit low. 90 spirit stones are a little too expensive. How about 70? A middle-aged man smiled and threw 70 spirit stones at Jiang Hao. He then picked up the talisman. Senior, Jiang Hao shook his head as he held onto the talisman. I can't sell it to you for that much. Can't sell it to me? The middle-aged man smiled, and the aura of the peak of the Golden Core realm surged. What do you think now? Senior, at least give me some real spirit stones, Jiang Hao said. The 70 spirit stones he had thrown at Jiang Hao were all fake. This was too much. You think these are fake? They are all real, the middle-aged man said. For a moment, a powerful force pressed on Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao withdrew his hand and remained silent. Great. I told you this place is not bad. The cultivators here are so sensible. Ha ha ha. He left with a smile and said that he would come here often. After the man left, Jiang Hao quietly followed him. Along the way, he found that it wasn't just him who was being treated like this. Other vendors were going through the same thing. These overseas people appeared friendly on the surface, but they were actually robbers. They robbed people who had a lower cultivation realm than theirs in broad daylight. Chapter 493. Chapter 493. Such killing must be the work of the Black Heaven sect. Chapter 493. Such killing must be the work of the Black Heaven sect. At night, Jiang Hao walked along a path. There was a person walking ahead and smiling. He was accompanied by someone. They were talking and laughing. Today's gains are not bad. How about you? The middle-aged man asked his companion. Mine's great too. I almost got into a conflict with someone, but I handled it properly, the younger man said nonchalantly. The Heavenly Note sect is indeed remote. They follow orders obediently like a sheep, the middle-aged man said with a smile. This time we got a lot more gains than usual, the young man said. Today, I also saw a pretty woman. I'll do her in a few days. She's in the early stage of the Golden Core realm and seems to have just advanced. The young man licked his lips lustfully. This place is far from overseas, and indeed, it has its own unique flavor, the middle-aged man said with a smile. Today, I also encountered a good talisman vendor. I bought something from him with fake spirit stones. He looked so powerless when he realized it. It's really the same everywhere. Ha ha ha, yes, the same thing happened to me too, the young man said. The two laughed and walked into the woods. There were few people around. At that moment, the middle-aged man turned to look at the person beside him and was about to speak. Bang! A sword light severed the other person's head, and blood splattered all over. At the same time, a long spear followed. Bang! The long spear pierced his throat. Along with that, dark red arrows pierced their bodies and crushed their flesh. What just happened? The middle-aged man was terrified and confused. He couldn't understand how someone had suddenly attacked them in this place. However, in the last moment before his life ended, he seemed to see three figures. It was not an illusion. There were three people near him. Jiang Hao was a little surprised. He hadn't expected the two people to suddenly rush out and attack. They didn't notice him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have rushed out. If they had come a little earlier, he wouldn't have had to intervene. Now that three of them attacked at the same time, it was a bit awkward. After the attack, the three of them became aware of each other, but they couldn't determine who was who. Killing overseas people didn't matter, but killing fellow disciples was a big problem. No one dared to risk killing an unknown person within the sect, and Jiang Hao was no exception. He saw a woman with a sword on the left and a man with a bow on the right. The former wore a veil, and the latter, a mask. Jiang Hao was surrounded by purple energy, which prevented prying eyes from seeing him. For a moment, The three of them looked at each other. Jiang Hao sighed and silently retreated. He blended into the darkness. The remaining two both breathed a sigh of relief. The other person had made a silent move, and they had been caught completely unawares. In the courtyard, Jiang Hao sat on a chair and sighed heavily. In order to avoid trouble, he had left first. But he had lost the chance to get spirit stones. He couldn't even get back the 90 spirit stones that he had sold the talisman for. I should have realized that there would be displeased people. How could the Heavenly Note sect not act out when they were being robbed of their resources? The one who made a move might not necessarily be the one being harassed, but more likely someone wanting to make a profit. After all, robbing fellow disciples was risky, but robbing outsiders was basically harmless. This was especially true for outsiders who came to the sect and harassed others. It was an opportunity to make a profit. I wonder if the Law Enforcement Hall will be furious again tomorrow. It's just 2 golden core realm cultivators, yet it attracted 2 people in the primordial spirit realm, and him. The other overseas people were also in danger. The next day, Jiang Hao woke up before dawn. He took a chair and sat on the balcony. He looked toward the direction of the Law Enforcement Hall and waited for a response. Unfortunately, there was no response from that side even after it was daylight. Only 2 people killed last night? What a pity. If the seniors failed to teach the overseas people a lesson, there would be more fights and deaths. It would be troublesome for him when he set up his stall later. He couldn't handle them one by one. That would attract too much attention. After watering the heavenly fragrance Dao flower, Jiang Hao looked at the immortal peach tree. There were not many fruits left on it. Xiao Li must have picked them. He didn't understand why she insisted on doing it secretly. Perhaps when no one was around, the spirit beast boasted about its prestige and made Xiao Li follow its orders. That way, the spirit beast wouldn't have Jiang Hao mocking its status. But Jiang Hao had never mocked the beast's boasting. If it said its status was high, it did. There was no need to argue. He found quite a few people gathered at the spirit herb garden. It seemed like they were discussing something important. What happened? Jiang Hao asked Cheng Chou. Senior brother Jiang, Cheng Chou said. The Law Enforcement Hall's people asked us to gather and wait here. Why? Jiang Hao asked. I heard that many people died, and the sect is investigating the matter, Cheng Chou said in worry. Jiang Hao frowned. He was surprised. Many people died. Were they overseas people or the sect's disciples? It was highly likely that they might have been the overseas people. If the dead were of the sect, that would be a serious problem. Liu Xingchen arrived after some time. He didn't explain anything but informed them that they could disband. This indicated that the ones who had died were probably overseas people. If the victims were the sect's disciples, a thorough investigation would have begun. Do you know what actually happened, senior brother? Jiang Hao asked. Many overseas people have died in the past few days. Although there were a few conflicts before, it wasn't a huge problem, said Liu Xingchen. We cautioned some seniors who were too reckless. But these last 2 days, the number of those taking action increased. It is as if they had made an agreement, so the sect has reason to suspect that someone incited this conflict. It seems like they want to provoke the alliance between our sect and the overseas people. After an investigation by the Law Enforcement Hall, it was confirmed that it was done by the Black Heaven sect, who falsely claimed to be a righteous and reputable sect. Jiang Hao was speechless. The Black Heaven sect's displeasure towards the Heavenly Note sect was not unknown. Do the overseas people also think this way? Jiang Hao asked. They probably think so too. Now, they've started to condemn the Black Heaven sect. It seems they plan to send someone to the Black Heaven sect to demand an explanation, Liu Xingchen said. Jiang Hao sighed. What kind of explanation would they demand? Since they wanted to sow discord, why only kill our overseas people and not the Heavenly Note sect's people? This was just a joke. The overseas people were not fools. Why couldn't they see through it? But this was, after all, the Heavenly Note sect. Even if they saw through it, what could they do? Ultimately, it was because they didn't control their people well, which brought about this disaster. Moreover, Jiang Hao had reasons to suspect that this was intentionally orchestrated by the higher-ups from overseas. They wanted to test the Heavenly Note sect. Perhaps they didn't think the consequences would be this severe. By the way, how many people died? Jiang Hao asked. 70% of the group were killed. Everything happened too fast. They didn't even have time to react, Liu Xingchen said. Really? Jiang Hao said. The Black Heaven sect is indeed formidable. Yes, the Black Heaven sect is indeed powerful. Liu Xingchen nodded in agreement. Chapter 494. Chapter 494. We condemn the Black Heaven sect. Chapter 494. We condemn the Black Heaven sect. Jiang Hao let out a sigh of relief. The damage to people overseas was severe, but the problem would likely subside in the future. At least, it wouldn't affect his stall. As for whether they would resent the Heavenly Note sect, that had nothing to do with him. He could simply avoid going overseas in the future. Thinking about how he had offended the Divine Corpse sect in the northern region before, offending some overseas people was nothing. These overseas people were top tier but couldn't be compared to major sects. They might unite. If they did that, their influence would be similar to that of major sects. When will the Heavenly Note sect be recognized as a major sect in the southern region? Then no one will dare to look down on us. After all, they had only a few hundred years of heritage, and very few people had heard of them. Their reputation was far from significant. After a visit to the Bright Moon sect, their reputation had slightly improved, but it still needed time to be established properly. For now, they were still a remote sect that was not exposed to the wider world. Have you had contact with the people overseas lately? Liu Xingchen asked. I met a few while selling talismans, Jiang Hao said truthfully. I wonder if that person is still okay, Liu Xingchen said with a smile. Jiang Hao was curious too. After talking for a while, Liu Xingchen left. Recent events seemed to pique his interest. The people of the Heavenly Note sect had been suppressed by the rules of the sect for a long time. The disciples within the sect dared not kill each other, but they would not hesitate to offend other sects, especially when the outsiders were so brazen. Even the higher-ups would turn a blind eye. If someone needed to be held responsible, the unlucky ones would bear the brunt. Anyway, Jiang Hao didn't think anyone would find him unless the Heavenly Essence Soul modeling mirror was deployed. However, the overseas people were not important enough to trigger the use of that artifact. The incidents hadn't even enraged the Law Enforcement Hall, let alone the whole sect. They were even inferior to the Divine Corpse sect. During that time, the strongest from the Divine Corpse sect could threaten the entire Heavenly Note sect, but the overseas visitors had nowhere near that level of power. Everything was calm for now, so Jiang Hao went to the Spirit Herb Garden to collect bubbles and wait for further developments. Bang! The teacup was flung onto the ground. This was the courtyard of a distinguished guest of the Heavenly Note sect. At this moment, a middle-aged man was furious as if he could erupt with the strongest aura at any moment. Heavenly King, are you really going to the Black Heaven sect to question them? An old man nearby asked. Question them? The Heavenly King was unmoved. Doesn't everyone know the truth in their hearts? Going to the Black Heaven sect to question them would make them a laughingstock. Aren't we already ridiculed enough? The others lowered their heads and dared not say much. Why are you silent? Didn't you all say you wanted to test the Heavenly Note sect? But now, you're all quiet. Who was the one who suggested it? The Heavenly King glared at them. Beside him were 4 people. They were the strongest group of practitioners on this trip. It was Vice Commander Xiong, the old man said. Where is he? How can he not be present after such an incident has happened? Asked the Heavenly King. The old man lowered his head and whispered, Vice Commander Xiong has disappeared. Disappeared? The Heavenly King was stunned. A chill ran through their hearts. At noon, they found Xiong's body by the river. The next day, the Heavenly King met with Elder Baiji of the Heavenly Note sect and emphasized that the Black Heaven sect was acting arrogantly and would pay the price if they ever came overseas. Baiji expressed that the Black Heaven sect had always been like this. She also criticized the Black Heaven sect for lacking principles. Then, Both of them expressed their seriousness about their collaboration this time. The Heavenly Note sect admitted that there was a loophole in their management which had allowed the Black Heaven sect to take advantage of the situation. Now that the loophole had been plugged in, such incidents would never happen again. The Heavenly King stood up to express his gratitude, and finally, he said that if the Heavenly Note sect had such sincerity, they should get a bit more share from the gains of the Sea Fog Cave expedition. Upon learning of the situation, Jiang Hao knew that the Heavenly King had yielded. He had taken the initiative to compromise to make sure the collaboration was smooth. He also hinted that if the Heavenly Note sect went overseas in the future, they wouldn't have an easy time. He spoke of the Black Heaven sect, but he was actually referring to the Heavenly Note sect. We should be more cautious when going overseas in the future. If they kept making enemies like this, they couldn't go to various major regions outside. They would carry the enmity wherever they went. But he could conceal his identity. For example, he could pretend to be a disciple of Azure Mountain. He had a token from there. He could also pretend to be a disciple of the Bright Moon sect, as he had the jade pendant from there. During these days, Jiang Hao had also been paying attention to the Sea Fog Cave. It was confirmed that the Heavenly King had received the information from Liu and knew about using blood and flesh as bait. However, whether they could understand the implications of it would depend entirely on them. He couldn't explain it to them. If he talked about creatures in the cave guiding the way, it would be traced back to him because only the people from the Lawless Tower knew about it, and they had told him about it. They transported a large amount of flesh and blood. The clue you mentioned is related to flesh and blood? Baiji asked. She was puzzled. How could this be used as bait? Yes, but whether it will work or not, that remains to be seen. The Heavenly King nodded. He was middle-aged in appearance, with a bit of stubble. In fact, he didn't know the exact situation either. This was the only information they had. It's been some time, Baiji said. She wasn't impatient. She just had no idea what they were waiting for. Wait a little longer. It needs some more time, the Heavenly King said. He didn't exactly know how much time was needed, as it wasn't mentioned in the intelligence he received. His source had hinted that this method originated from a very mysterious person and wouldn't go wrong. After waiting for about 3 days, Ajah suddenly became restless. This surprised Baiji. What do you want to say? Give me the flesh and blood, and I can do it, Ajah said. You can do what? Baiji asked. I know the way inside and can find people by their scent, Ajah said anxiously. Why are you in such a hurry? Baiji noticed something was off. I just saw the flesh and blood. It's going to rot, Ajah said. You want flesh and blood? Fine. Baiji smiled. Sign this, and I'll give you as much as you want, but on the condition that you behave. Baiji spread the scrolls in front of Ajah. What is this? Ajah asked. Our trust treaty. Baiji smiled. The Heavenly King furrowed his brow. Was she trying to enslave the creature? You'll deceive me. I won't sign, Ajah said. I'm not in a hurry, Baiji said calmly. At this moment, Ajah became increasingly restless. It constantly looked toward the depths of the sea fog. Baiji didn't care whether the creature submitted or not. She realized that they had found the clue needed to make the creature obey. It turned out that the creatures in the cave knew how to navigate inside the cave and could find missing people. Moreover, the flesh and blood pieces might be causing the creature's restlessness because competition had arrived. Everyone, get ready, Baiji said. The Heavenly King also realized that this was the clue to guide them further. The person who provided this information was truly exceptional. Unfortunately, they loved playing mysterious. I'll sign, Ajah said anxiously. But you must promise to keep your word. Of course. Baiji smiled sweetly. Overseas, Kai Tian sat in his room and looked outside. Recently, many people had gone to the southern region. Chapter 495, Chapter 495, The Beast was snatched away. Chapter 495, The Beast was snatched away. After the Black Heaven sect attacked overseas people, The incident was twisted into the Black Heavens sect disregarding the Heavenly Note sect's dignity and inciting trouble within their sect. The Heavenly Note sect bore the embarrassment on their own. Their overseas reputation remained unaffected. As Liu Xingchen said, concessions were made overseas, and the sect would certainly not stay idle. After that, there were a few updates from the Sea Fog Cave. Fortunately, they didn't encounter further harassment from overseas people. Last time, he had suffered a significant loss of 90 spirit stones. After that, the days were relatively peaceful. Though the number of overseas people increased, it didn't bring any significant impacts. Moreover, the sect did not allow disciples to act recklessly. Everything went back on track, and both sides were unwilling to disrupt the balance. So, they restrained their own people. Days passed peacefully for over a month. If it weren't for overseas matters, Jiang Hao felt that some of the Golden Core seniors might try to harass him. When they made a move, he would be able to establish himself as a Golden Core realm cultivator. In the eyes of everyone, he was still a newly advanced Golden Core realm cultivator who had achieved it through the Bloodwish path. Everyone wanted a reason to defeat him. There's no strong reason yet. I need to find a way to give them one. In the courtyard, Jiang Hao enjoyed the cool breeze. It was snowing outside the sect, but it didn't affect the inside of his area. Beast. Xiao Li ran into the courtyard. When she saw Jiang Hao, she stopped in her tracks and bowed. Senior brother Jiang. The beast is still sleeping, Jiang Hao said. At this moment, the beast was still lying on the edge of the heavenly fragrance Dao flower and drooling in its sleep. After years of nurturing, the heavenly fragrance Dao flower hadn't disappointed anyone. There were still only 7 leaves on it. There was very little progress in its growth. Jiang Hao was a bit worried. He feared that Hong Yuye might ask about its progress. There had been no progress for a long time. He appraised it several times. Everything was fine with the flower. It only needed water to grow. The immortal peach tree was the same. It only needed water. The only important thing was that it needed other divine items near it to grow pronally. As for the sweet leaf cold grass, it needed spirit liquid, but it had improved the soil a lot. The growth of spirit herbs in the courtyard was better than before, and the spiritual energy had become denser. The spirit herbs played a huge role, but the methods of the 100 Bones Forest played an even bigger one. It seemed like Bai Yi was trying to be friendly. Currently, Bai Yi was still in the early stage of the primordial spirit realm. There had been no signs of advancement. He didn't dare to seal his spirit. He feared that doing so might drop Bai Yi's cultivation to the peak of the Golden Core realm, which would have a significant impact. Beast. Xiao Li approached slowly. Then, taking advantage of the beast's distraction, she lifted it and ran out with a swoosh. Jiang Hao was baffled. Soon, voices came from outside. Beast, it's snowing outside. Let's go play in the snow. The white snow on the road is making me feel good. Remember to call my name, and the snow will fall even heavier, said the beast. It sounded confused. It seemed to have no idea what was happening. Can it snow a bit less? Of course, just say my name. Can it not snow at all? That requires me to negotiate in person. After all, I am destined to become a great demon someday. Really? Then, the villagers don't have to worry. They used to worry when it snowed at home because they were afraid that most families couldn't make it through. Xiao Li sounded joyful. The voices grew fainter. They were leaving. In heavy snow, times were hard outside. If famine broke out during this time, it would be terrifying. Only those who had experienced it could understand the struggle. Jiang Hao sighed and looked at his interface. In a few days, I'll turn 32. Time flies. Every time he saw his age, Jiang Hao couldn't help but feel a bit sentimental. Fortunately, his spirit stones were also increasing with his age. He had now saved over 27,000 spirit stones. After buying red azure tea, he didn't dare to spend his spirit stones recklessly. It was easy to draw attention. Also, he could advance in just a matter of days. If there were no accidents, he would become a late-stage soul ascension realm cultivator. Then, he would be on equal footing as senior brother Bai Yi, who was ranked 5th among the top disciples. I wonder what kind of strength the top 4 disciples have. Once he surpassed the top disciples, the remaining ones were some older disciples and some powerful elders. He didn't know how long it would take for him to surpass them all. From the looks of it, the first-ranked disciple must be at the return to Void Realm. The powerful elders would definitely be beyond that realm. Otherwise, they couldn't have captured Ji Yuqing. The elders were not like the top disciples. Top disciples were young and with infinite potential. Once the potential was exhausted, they would probably have to step down from the position of a top disciple. Being young, having high potential, and having strong combat strength were the requirements for a chief disciple. Lacking any of these 3 could potentially disqualify one from becoming a top disciple. When people said Han Ming possessed the demeanor of a top disciple, it signified just how high his potential was. And anyone with similar talent was nothing compared to Han Ming. Recently, I heard that he went for training again. He is probably preparing to consolidate his cultivation and advance toward the Golden Core realm. After tending to the spirit herbs in the spirit herb garden, he returned to his house. He took out a stone tablet to check the messages. Perhaps because the matter with the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment was over with, the 3 were active in the chats once again. Watching them chat, Jiang Hao shook his head. It seemed that the impression he left of himself was indeed one of strength and solitude. However, his ordinary days were much more boring than they imagined. If they knew that he spent every day tending to spirit herbs, they would probably be very surprised. He chuckled and continued reading the conversation. Because the name Kai Tian was mentioned during the gathering, Liu asked Xing about it. It was easier to find the person if he knew about the origin of the person. Jiang Hao nodded. Liu was right. He did need Liu's help. However, he didn't need it now. What surprised him was that Liu had found Kai Tian so quickly. He wondered what Kai Tian was feeling right now. Chapter 496, Chapter 496. Kai Tian, how have you been? Chapter 496. Kai Tian, how have you been? In the Milky Way Sea region, on a bustling island, Kai Tian sat on the floor of a medium-sized treasure shop. Now, he had firmly established his position here, and the surrounding cultivators respected him, unlike the Blood Shadow sect, where no one respected or feared him. Here, even those with higher cultivation realms would show respect to him. Because he had a powerful force backing him, it made them wary. The strength of the end of all things was something he hadn't expected. But even a secretive force needs spirit stones. Naturally, they need someone to stand at the forefront. And since he had just joined, he remained unknown. So, he was suitable for this task. He enjoyed this peaceful period, but the hatred in his heart became increasingly apparent. He wanted to kill more people under the guise of the end of all things. As for the matter of the mysterious person, he had long forgotten about it. Now he was Xuelu, not Kai Tian. The person couldn't find him and couldn't control him. This was not the Eastern region. This place was not within that person's sphere of influence. He was grateful to the person who helped him seek his revenge, but that matter was over now. Thump, thump. Someone knocked on the door and interrupted Kai Tian's thoughts. Come in. Creak. At the door stood a young woman. Senior Xue, there's someone here who needs your attention. All right, let them in. Xuelu nodded. Anyone who needed to meet him was either strong in cultivation or willing to pay a good price for something. Soon, a young man walked in with the woman from before. He had a restrained aura, so it was difficult to know what cultivation realm he was in. No cultivation aura? Kai Tian was alarmed. Yet, he saw a divine light in the person's eyes. This wasn't an ordinary person. He didn't hesitate. Xuelu stood up to greet him. Respected senior, please forgive me for not welcoming you earlier. He promptly asked the young woman to pour them some tea. That's all right, said the young man politely. I heard that a remarkable senior was here, and today, I see that the reputation is indeed well deserved. I am Xuelu. May I inquire about your name, fellow disciples? Kai Tian remained courteous. My name is Zhu Shen. The young man smiled. Friend Zhu, please have a seat. Kai Tian extended his hand in invitation. The two of them sat down, and tea was poured for them. Friend Zhu, what are you here to buy this time? Kai Tian asked. I want to buy a valuable shield. Zhu Shen smiled. At that point, a treasure was brought in. It was a shield usable for Golden Core Realm cultivators. It was grayish-white and seemed to have water droplets inside. This is the Profound Heart Water Shield. Kai Tian smiled. Friend Zhu, you have a good eye. This shield may not be top tier, but it is highly practical. Are you unsatisfied with the price? No. Zhu Shen shook his head slightly. I just wanted to use this as an excuse to meet you. To be precise, I was sent here by someone. The words made Kai Tian frown. Has my hideout been discovered? Apart from him and a few others, no one knew that this place was the property of the End of All Things. May I ask who sent you here? Kai Tian asked calmly. Could it be an adversary of the End of All Things? Zhu Shen smiled and didn't say much. He paid the spirit stones. Is this enough? I'll take this treasure. After receiving the treasure, he handed over an envelope. The person who sent me here for you asked me to give you this. Kai Tian's face changed, and his hands trembled. The paper fell. He instinctively took 2 steps back in fear. There was only a sentence written in the paper. Kai Tian, how have you been? Such a simple greeting made Kai Tian terrified. There was only one person who knew his name and would send a message. He thought he had escaped from that person's grasp. Only now did he realize that he had been in that person's palm all this while. The terrifying energy made him feel uneasy. His heart raced. The fear spread to his entire being. He couldn't understand how he had been exposed. At the Heavenly Note sect, Jiang Hao woke up early in the morning and yawned. Then, he sat up on his bed. Last night, he went to sleep to see if the Earth Extreme Silence Pearl would show any new signs. Unfortunately, there was still nothing. This pearl was a potential threat. He needed to ascertain it first and eliminate the danger. He saw 2 blue bubbles at the edge of the Heavenly Fragrance Dao flower when he walked to the courtyard. He couldn't add more since it was at full capacity. Jiang Hao glanced at the interface. Today, he could advance to a higher stage in his cultivation realm. After watering the plants, Jiang Hao sat in the courtyard for a while. He didn't rush to go to the spirit herb garden. The beast was still sleeping, and Xiao Li would be here soon. When she took the spirit beast away, he would go to the spirit herb garden. In the past few days, Xiao Li had been taking the spirit beast outside to play. She also took Chu Chuan along for training. Since Lin Ji was about to go out of the sect, he was also pulled along by the spirit beast to train with Xiao Li. The spirit beast said that the ordinary lifeblood refinement realm couldn't improve Lin Ji's ability to take beatings. Jiang Hao didn't mind. The spirit beast could teach him however it wanted. As long as it didn't disrupt his regular teaching, it was fine. Moreover, Lin Ji trusted the spirit beast. The spirit beast didn't disappoint anyone, so there was no need to worry too much. When Chu Chuan found out that Lin Ji was his senior, he was stunned. A senior at the lifeblood refinement realm was unheard of, and Xiao Li was a good kid. She had heard her parents talk about respect, so a senior, no matter his strength, was still a senior. Chu Chuan had no choice but to call Lin Ji senior brother too. But he was unconvinced, so he beat Lin Ji in a fight. Xiao Li beat Chu Chuan again. Cheng Chou reported all of this to Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao didn't know how to feel about it and just let it be. While waiting, he looked at the stone tablet. He found that Liu had already completed his task, which was good. Jiang Hao was surprised. Gui had already asked for a few snow god pills before and still wanted more. Beast! Xiao Li sneaked into the courtyard and squatted next to the spirit beast. When Jiang Hao looked over, she rummaged in her pocket and handed him a few white dates. Then, with a swoosh, she snatched the spirit beast away. Jiang Hao shook his head, ate the white dates, and went to the spirit herb garden. As soon as he arrived, he met Miao Tinglian. Junior brother Jiang, something big has happened, Miao Tinglian said quietly. What? Jiang Hao asked in confusion. Here. This is for you. Miao Tinglian handed an invitation to Jiang Hao. Invitation from the royal family? Jiang Hao was surprised. Wasn't this related to the marriage alliance that Gui had mentioned? Jiang Hao was even more puzzled. The invitation was for Mu Qi, his senior. What was the use of giving him this? He couldn't go out of the sect, so the invitation was useless. Chapter 497. Chapter 497. The Demoness discovered the invitation. Chapter 497. The Demoness discovered the invitation. Jiang Hao sighed and looked at his senior. Senior sister Miao, if you don't want senior brother Mu to go, you can just tell him. There's no need to give me this. You're thinking too much, Miao Tinglian said. Your senior brother Mu Qi doesn't want to go, so I don't need to tell him. I saw that the invitation was useless for him, so I wanted to give it to you. How old are you this year? Jiang Hao hesitated. 31. He was not young anymore, and for a moment, he didn't want to reveal his age. Back when he was in his teens and 20s, he never had these thoughts. Time had indeed left a significant impact on him. 31? Miao Tinglian said in surprise. A few years ago, you were only 24. Jiang Hao was speechless. Miao Tinglian's mind was full of romantic matchmaking, and she sometimes pestered him about it. 31, and still single? It's time to find a partner for you, Miao Tinglian said seriously. Senior sister Miao, do I have to go to Imperial City to find a partner? Jiang Hao asked. You haven't found one in the sect so far, have you? Miao Tinglian asked. Jiang Hao sighed and then looked at Mu Qi, who was dealing with matters in the distance. Jiang Hao greeted him. What did you do this time? Mu Qi looked at Miao Tinglian helplessly. You already have a partner, don't you? Don't you care about junior brother Jiang? Miao Tinglian said righteously. Mu Qi saw the invitation in Jiang Hao's hand and understood everything. He then said, if you have time, you can go and take a look. If you don't, there's no need to go at all. The royal invitation can be useful, and many people want to go. Can it be sold? Jiang Hao thought. After a moment of hesitation, he put away the invitation and thanked Mu Qi and Miao Tinglian. He left before Miao Tinglian could say anything more. Jiang Hao seems to have understood. Now, it seems he will go to Imperial City, said Miao Tinglian as she nudged the person next to her. Mu Qi glanced at her and said gently, you might have used reason and emotion to persuade him, which made him see the pros and cons. Miao Tinglian snorted. She thought Mu Qi was saying that to make her happy. Jiang Hao paid no attention to the two of them and focused on his own affairs. As for the invitation, he would ask around in the vicinity later to see if anyone was interested in it. The royal family had a significant reputation in the southern region. Although it couldn't be compared to the Heavenly Note sect, it had a certain special status in the entire south. However, being special didn't mean it was beneficial for him. Gui was over there, and the Saint bandits were also in contact with them. Just these two things meant immense danger. If we went there, he would be dragged into whatever was going on there. Why seek unnecessary trouble? It was better to collect bubbles and take care of the herbs. The days passed quickly. After instructing Cheng Chou, he went to his courtyard. He didn't plan to do anything today because he needed to concentrate and prepare for his advancement tonight. He had already looked up the changes a few days ago and had even spent 1,500 spirit stones to buy a formation to conceal his aura and changes in the surroundings. Advancing to a new stage or cultivation realm always required spirit stones. So, he had to earn them diligently. Back in the courtyard, Jiang Hao went to the living room, took out the invitation, and used his universe in a palm ability to seal it. The invitation wasn't ordinary. It was too eye-catching. Then, he went to the bedroom and placed it under the pillow. After doing that, he went straight to the cultivation room and set up a formation. He sat cross-legged on the floor. Instead of rushing to advance, he examined himself. After making sure everything was fine, he adjusted his state to its peak and stabilized his mental state. He had slept for a while earlier to ensure that there were no hidden inner demons. Everything was ready. Jiang Hao started extracting his cultivation and lifeblood. The purple energy covered him. Not long after Jiang Hao started his advancement, the spirit beast came back. It looked around the front and back of the courtyard to make sure everything was fine. Then, it lay down beside the heavenly fragrance Dao flower and yawned. It sniffed the air as it savored the flower's fragrance and rejuvenated its spirit. Its eyes were on guard as it observed everything. It wanted to make sure its master wasn't around. It then stealthily approached the heaven fragrance Dao flower and stuck out its tongue toward a leaf. However, when its tongue was about to touch the leaf, it withdrew. It felt that this was too dangerous. Before it could retract its tongue fully, it suddenly lost consciousness. In the blink of an eye, the spirit beast, bruised and swollen, was hanging from the wall. At the same time, a red figure appeared in the courtyard and looked at the wooden house. She sat on a chair and began to make tea on her own. In the moonlight, she sipped the tea alone. A gentle breeze blew, and her robe fluttered lightly. Her hair swayed gently. The leaves of the tree rustled. The whole place was peaceful. She placed the teacup down and stared up at the starry sky until the moon faded from view. She didn't raise the teacup to her lips again. Yet, steam was still rising from it. It didn't seem to cool down at all. The sky began to brighten, and the first rays of the sun appeared. Only then did she lift the teacup to her lips and sip her tea. After taking a sip of it, she looked at the spirit beast. Her slender fingers drew a circle in the air. A rope tied the spirit beast and hung it from a branch of the immortal peach tree. Then, she turned to look at the wooden house. It seemed calmer inside than before. After a little while, she could hear footsteps from inside. A person walked out of the house after a while. He was dressed in a dark blue outfit, with some white decoration. There were also some red fire patterns at the edges. He looked good. Ordinary people would definitely find him extraordinary. But in the cultivation world, he was just ordinary. He looked surprised when he saw her in the courtyard. "Greetings, senior," he said respectfully. "You advanced?" Hong Yuye asked with a smile. "Yes." Hong Yuye looked at Jiang Hao. "What cultivation realm have you reached?" "Early stage of the Golden Core realm," Jiang Hao said. Hong Yuye smiled. "So you advanced from Foundation Establishment realm to Golden Core realm last night in your room?" "Senior, you have keen eyes," Jiang Hao said. Hong Yuye chuckled and then looked at the spirit beast. "What is that?" "A spirit beast," Jiang Hao said. "What breed?" Hong Yuye asked. "Evil beast," Jiang Hao said. "Was it evil naturally, or did it become evil after getting close to you?" Hong Yuye asked with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. "Senior, you are joking." Jiang Hao felt uneasy. Hong Yuye didn't say much and went inside. "Prepare hot water for me," she instructed as she passed the bathroom. After that, she headed straight for the second floor. Footsteps sounded in Jiang Hao's ears and then disappeared. He assumed she had reached the second floor. He let out a sigh of relief. He began to prepare the hot water. He could do it directly with his technique, so it didn't take much time. He called out for her a couple of times, but there was no response. So, he walked up the stairs to the upper floor. He saw Hong Yuye sitting at the table and looking at a red invitation card. It was an invitation to a royal marriage. Chapter 498, Chapter 498, The Demoness sleeps on his bed. Chapter 498, The Demoness sleeps on his bed. The second floor of the wooden house had very simple decorations, but everything necessary was present. It was also quite spacious. At that moment, Jiang Hao stood at the door and watched Hong Yuye reading the words on the invitation card. He didn't care. As for the fact that the card was discovered and the seal broken, it wasn't surprising. The seal couldn't protect the sealed item from someone with a powerful cultivation. "Do you want to be a prince consort?" Hong Yuye asked indifferently. "Senior, you must be joking." Jiang Hao shook his head. "This is a senior's invitation. He didn't need it, so he gave it to me to sell." "Sell?" Hong Yuye was surprised. Jiang Hao nodded. Hong Yuye looked at Jiang Hao for a long while before turning away. "How old are you this year?" "Almost 32, Jiang Hao said. I suppose in the normal world, a person at 32 would be considered old, right? Perhaps. For ordinary non-cultivators, families would arrange their children's marriage by their early 20s because they didn't live that long. 32 years old was indeed considered old. Most people would be too overworked by that age and didn't have many good years in life left. The existence of immortals did not make their lives better. The only way to live a good life was if there was an immortal in the family. However, such families were rare. Sometimes he wondered why his stepmother had lied and sold him to the Heavenly Note sect. She could have just explained the significance to him. If she had said, "Go there, and you won't starve," he would have gone willingly. He might have even thanked her and found a way to repay her. Instead, she had lied and sold him to the sect. In the end, Jiang Hao figured that she needed the money, and she might not have had enough confidence in him that he would survive in a demonic sect. But what about his father? He rarely saw his father in his childhood, so he didn't know how his father actually was. His father probably just went along with his stepmother's decisions. "Do you also want to find a partner?" Hong Yuye asked. Jiang Hao lowered his head. "Do I want to?" When he set aside the fact that he was an immortal disciple and wanted to get stronger and thought about it from an ordinary person's point of view, it was practical for him to get married at this age. But was it even useful? He was poisoned by the heaven extinction Gu poison. Until he was cured of that poison, he felt nothing toward other women, except the one who had the yin Gu poison. And that woman was right in front of him. If she got angry, he couldn't even find a place to bury himself. "I don't want to," Jiang Hao said. Hong Yuye stood up and handed the invitation back to Jiang Hao. Then, she went downstairs. Jiang Hao took the invitation and followed her downstairs. The Southern royal family is recognized by the Southern region. The invitation is created using the power of the whole land. The more you carry it, the more you will be marked by the land and catch the attention of the royal family, Hong Yuye said. Jiang Hao once again applied the seal to the invitation. That should make it safe. In front of the bathroom, Hong Yuye stood at the door and slowly closed it. Jiang Hao, who had wanted to follow her in, was stunned at himself. It seemed that he was still not used to it. When he came back to his senses, he was a little relieved. At least, he didn't have to endure the torture. "Stand guard outside," said a voice from inside. Jiang Hao could only nod in agreement. After that, he planned to read for a bit and have some tea. He went to the courtyard to find a teapot and discovered that there was still some tea inside. It was steaming hot. He understood that Hong Yuye had brewed it. After all, her teacup was on the table. He took the teacup and the pot and walked to the front of the bathroom. He then poured himself a cup of tea. The fragrance of the tea was refreshing, and it seemed to invigorate both his body and mind. After a sip, he felt that the taste was familiar. As the tea washed over his body, it seemed like all the problems after his advancement were starting to dissipate and everything was rejuvenating. September spring? Jiang Hao was shocked. Then, he switched to a larger cup and poured all the tea into it. He downed it in one gulp. After finishing the tea, he began to absorb the power of the tea leaves. Not only could this help him restore his optimal state, but it could also enhance his cultivation. It could improve his control over spiritual energy to some extent too. Indeed, the tea leaves that cost 20,000 were extraordinary. In the bathroom, Hong Yuye cleaned herself and lay on the side of the tub. She looked at the door. Her beautiful eyes looked calm and revealed nothing of her thoughts. After a while, she closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. She didn't know how long had passed, but she slowly opened her eyes and met the gaze of a man. She could see clearly that his gaze involuntarily shifted downward. Boom! She sent him flying. There was a loud impact. Jiang Hao winced in pain. Hong Yuye covered her chest with her hands and closed her eyes again. "Turn your back to the screen and stand guard." She fell asleep once more. Jiang Hao stood up. He looked flustered. This was the second time today that he had approached her when there was no response from her. The first time, he had sensed nothing of her aura until he went up to see her reading the invitation card. The second time was when he had not sensed her presence and she hadn't responded to his calls, so he had come in to check on her. Unexpectedly, she woke up and their eyes met. He had seen something that he couldn't forget. He tried to not think about it, but he couldn't. His mental state was still not steady enough. Otherwise, all women should have been the same in his eyes, regardless of whether they were wearing fine clothes or simple ones, or whether they were wearing anything at all. They would all be equal in his eyes. In fact, under the influence of the heaven extinction Gu poison, he had remained calm, except when it came to Hong Yuye. He felt a bit lost. After drinking the tea, he had already returned to his peak state. It was already late at night, so he walked in cautiously. Hong Yuye had been in the water for too long. "Senior, why don't you go to bed?" "It's late," Jiang Hao said kindly with his back to the screen. There was no response from behind him. It was only after a while that the sound of water splashing started again. After a while, Hong Yuye, dressed in simple clothes, walked past Jiang Hao. She went straight to the second floor. After a while, Jiang Hao looked at Hong Yuye who was lying in his bed. He felt flustered. He had suggested that she go to bed to imply that she should head back to her place. He needed to collect the bubbles in the spirit herb garden and prepare for tomorrow's bubbles. Moreover, the spirit beast had been hanging for a day from the tree, and he didn't know if it could survive. But Hong Yuye had come up to sleep on his bed. He hadn't expected that. Helplessly, he could only go to the balcony. The mountain suppression technique and the moonslaying technique needed to be replaced in his wrist guards. He also needed to check in on the reappearance of the hidden spirit technique. Unknowingly, it was already dawn. Jiang Hao sighed in relief. Everything had been replaced. "How much do you know about the royal family?" asked a voice from behind him. It was Hong Yuye, who had changed into a new outfit. The simple dress had turned into a red and white gown, and her hair was tied up in a simple bun. There was no trace of sleepiness in her eyes. "I don't know much," Jiang Hao said and stood up. The southern royal family is chosen by the land in the southern region. The more the land needs them, the more favor it bestows upon them. And the more prosperous and thriving the southern region becomes, the more the land will withdraw its favor, Hong Yuye said. Jiang Hao was stunned. What happens if the land is chaotic and desolate? Chapter 499, Chapter 499, Are you really not going to cultivate? Chapter 499, Are you really not going to cultivate? In the eastern, western, southern, and northern regions, there were royal families, but their presence was not so prominent. At least, that was the case within the major sects. The most well-known were the immortal sects, like the Clear Sky School. Even though it was in the east, Jiang Hao had heard the sect's name plenty of times. As for the southern royal family, he had only heard of them recently. In the past, it was either seen in books or mentioned in passing. This time, it was mainly because of the marriage alliance that it came to everybody's attention. Even though he knew of the existence of the royal family, he only thought of them as a group of people who ruled over most of the states and prefectures. They had long lifespans only because they were considered special. But he didn't expect that the existence of the royal family had a direct relationship with the prosperity of the southern land. If prosperity and abundance could take back the favor from the land, then who would even strive to govern and make the south prosperous? Was it possible that most of the poverty in the south was caused by the royal family to remain in power? It's similar to what you're thinking, but not exactly the same. Hong Yuye shook her head. Chaos and poverty cannot help them obtain more favor. When there is a lot of grievance and suffering, it can actually weaken the favor. Only in special circumstances, it can increase the favor. The situation is too complex to be explained simply. So, if the favor is bestowed to promote prosperity, wouldn't the South be in a different situation? Jiang Hao asked. The southern land is not a person, and favor cannot be easily revoked. Hong Yuye looked at the sunrise. If the royal family possesses unparalleled favor, then what will happen to the land? They might enslave and govern the land for their own gain. That was what came into Jiang Hao's mind. Human greed knows no bounds. This kind of thing is bound to happen. At this point, the sun had already risen, and Hong Yuye looked at the person beside her. And who told you that the earth needs life to flourish? Is it good for the earth? Jiang Hao was stunned. He then understood. Indeed, the more prosperous the land was, the more it would be exploited. How could that be a good thing? And the land also needed the presence of humans. After all, when the land faced destruction, if there were no immortals, everything would cease to exist. For example, the heavenly fate misfortune pearl could only be suppressed by people of great luck. The people of great luck were obviously human. Jiang Hao understood that, but he thought that the royal family would likely do things beyond his expectations in order to gain more favor. But not every ruler of the royal family might act like that, so there's no need to worry too much. After all, it didn't concern him much. As for the purpose behind the marriage alliance, Jiang Hao couldn't figure it out. Hong Yuye got up and glanced at the courtyard. Where's the tea? Here. Jiang Hao took out the teapot. Hong Yuye took the teapot and shook it twice. She then looked at the person in front of her. Empty. There are only tea leaves left, Jiang Hao said. What about the tea? I'll brew a new pot for you right away. Taking the teapot, Jiang Hao took out the tea leaves and began to work. As Hong Yuye sat down, a new table and chairs appeared. The balcony wasn't that big, and it looked a bit crowded, but it was enough for 2 people to sit. Jiang Hao felt that it was necessary to expand the balcony so that Hong Yuye would have no reason to complain. Was there a new gathering? Hong Yuye asked. Yes. Jiang Hao nodded. He poured himself a cup as well. This time, he brewed heavenly sky snowbud tea. It cost him 250 spirit stones. He had already brewed September Spring several times before and couldn't continue with it. He would leave the remaining tea dregs for the spirit beast. He secretly observed Hong Yuye as she drank her tea. Fortunately, there were no extreme reactions. He was relieved. If she frowned, he would switch to red azure tea. Fortunately, Hong Yuye's mind was not on tea right now. Jiang Hao began to talk about the last gathering. There was nothing special to note. He started with the Saint Bandits. Hong Yuye remained quiet. Then, she stretched out her finger and, suddenly, a little girl appeared outside. It was Xiao Li. She was asleep. Jiang Hao was astonished. How did Xiao Li end up here? Hong Yuye didn't wake her. She gently placed her on the courtyard seat, and then said, "Go on." Jiang Hao didn't mention Yin Wei's matter and talked about the deal with Liu instead. The main point of this matter was about Kai Tian's whereabouts. However, it seemed that the woman in front of him wasn't very concerned about it. This was good. He could delay the main investigation a little while longer. Jiang Hao also mentioned the Southern royal family and their connection with the Saint Bandits. The Southern royal family have contacts with the Saint Bandits? Hong Yuye asked. Yes. It may be for cooperation related to bestowing talents and the like, Jiang Hao said. Hong Yuye shook her head. Impossible. The royal family would not have such cooperation with the Saint Bandits. Why? Jiang Hao was puzzled. In his view, it was understandable for the royal family to cooperate with the Saint Bandits. Normally, those with innate talents were few. Even if the royal family was special, the vast majority did not possess innate talents. It was very difficult for them to have a genius of their own. So, the abilities of the Saint Bandits were what they needed. Because they are the royal family, and they are blessed by the favor of the southern land. The path the Saint Bandits take is completely opposite to theirs. Unless the royal family is willing to give up their royal status, they wouldn't consort with the Saint Bandits. Hong Yuye put down her teacup. Jiang Hao was surprised. It seemed that those favored by the land couldn't strip others of their talents. If they weren't collaborating, why were the 2 sides connected? In any case, the Saint Bandits and the royal family were not good people. There would surely be a lot of trouble in this marriage alliance. Hong Yuye didn't bring up the matter anymore, and Jiang Hao began to talk about the heavenly king, Hai Luo. He thought Hong Yuye wouldn't be interested in this, but unexpectedly, she was listening carefully. He talked about everything from beginning to end. Helplessly, Jiang Hao began to talk about Miao Anxian. He told her everything from Miao Anxian using Hai Luo's resources to get stronger to her ending up in the Abyssal Sea. Do you think she can still survive? Jiang Hao asked. Hong Yuye shook her head. She didn't speak. Throughout the entire story, Jiang Hao also tactfully concealed the events regarding Kai Tian. He had found Kai Tian and sent him a message. He could tell her that another time. After putting down the teacup, Hong Yuye gradually disappeared. At this moment, a piece of paper fell on the table. It was a formation blueprint. After a quick look, Jiang Hao knew it could be used to upgrade the formations around the courtyard. He didn't quite understand it and would need to consult with some other people. Then, he would buy the materials needed. It would cost quite a few spirit stones. I wonder if selling the invitation card will be enough for the upgrade. Jiang Hao planned to wander around and see who needed an invitation card to the royal wedding. At this time, cries for help came from below. It was the spirit beast. Xiao Li also yawned. She seemed puzzled and wondered how she had fallen asleep. In the imperial city in the southern region, Baizhu walked out of the room and found a young man waiting for her. Elder brother? She was quite happy to see him. I heard you've advanced to the primordial spirit realm? Yes. Baiyu smiled. I just advanced. How about you? Are you really not going to cultivate? Chapter 500. The long-awaited oppressor has finally arrived. Chapter 500. The long-awaited oppressor has finally arrived. She looked at her smiling elder brother, who was always so serious most of the time. Baizhu shook her head gently. I have been cultivating, and I am only slightly inferior to the extraordinary genius. Ha ha ha. Baiyu burst into laughter. Sister, you still love to joke like this. Your Highness, the princess has always been like this since she was a child, said Xiao Yi. I know. Baiyu nodded and looked at his sister. Shall we go outside for a stroll? Baizhu smiled. Of course. I'll follow your arrangements. On the way, Baiyu suddenly asked, how old are you this year? Brother, it's impolite to ask a lady her age, Baizhu said. Anyway, I'm 16 years old this year. You do look like you're truly 16, Baiyu said with a smile. Baizhu glared at him. He chuckled and took out a small shield. This is for you. What is this? Baizhu took the shield. It's a little magic treasure I picked up when I was out. It can be used for defense. You're often not in the imperial city, and there are times when Xiao Yi can't take care of you. This is safer, Baiyu said earnestly. Thank you, brother. Baizhu put away the shield and smiled. I've found some cultivation techniques recently. I'll give them to you as well. Take a look and see which one you can cultivate. If you advance to the Foundation Establishment realm, your lifespan will increase significantly. Alright, I'll take a look tonight. You're obedient now, but after you go back, you'll just pretend this conversation never happened. A genius has a bit of a personality. The two laughed at that. Are you planning to marry? Asked Baiyu as they reached the small pool. No. Baizhu shook her head. Among the princesses, I'm considered much older. No one would be interested in someone old. You just said you're 16. Baiyu laughed. It's fine if you don't want to marry. No one will dare to force you. Although our eldest brother doesn't care much about us, he is ultimately our elder brother. Forcing you would be disrespectful to him too. But there's a downside to it. Big brother has his own faction. If the competition fails in the end, we'll all be implicated. So, marrying you off would be safer for you because you won't get implicated. What if our lifespan doesn't even extend to that point? Baizhu asked. That's true, Baiyu said helplessly. Brother, is this marriage alliance different from the past? Baizhu sat in a pavilion and asked. Baiyu sat opposite her and frowned slightly. It's a bit different. There are some people I've never seen before, and the ones invited this time are all geniuses from various sects. I might have underestimated the whole thing and assumed that geniuses from sects wouldn't be interested in princesses. Baizhu lowered her head. She was thinking that if the royal family cooperated with the Saint Bandits to seize the genius's talent, it would lead to a siege of the entire southern region. Their father, although old, wasn't that muddle-headed. Let's not overthink this. If there's any trouble, please inform me as soon as possible, Baiyu said. Brother, you should also be careful. I feel that the imperial city is not very stable lately, Baizhu said. After seeing her brother off, Baizhu took out the shield and examined it. A spirit treasure at the primordial spirit realm was indeed quite extraordinary. Second brother really cares for me, unlike my eldest brother, who doesn't even visit. Baizhu sighed. If her eldest brother didn't visit her for over 100 years, she would have to go and visit him. After more than 100 years, when her lifespan was exhausted, she would have to make a trip. After that, there was no need to stay in the southern region. There were many dangers like Jing and the heavenly fate misfortune pearl in the south, after all. The level of danger was extremely high. Speaking of which, Jing should have returned to the southern region. I wonder if the cooperation between the royal family and the Saint Bandits will attract his attention. He seemed to have many sources for this type of information. Maybe she could ask about it in the gathering next time. A few days later, in early January, Jiang Hao looked at the interface. 32. It felt like he was only 19 yesterday. Fortunately, compared to when he was 19, he had many more divine abilities now, and his cultivation realm had increased significantly. At that time, he had just met Hong Yuye. He was at the 8th stage of the lifeblood refinement realm, and he only had the daily appraisal and the 9 revolutions death substitution abilities. He still didn't know what the 9 revolutions death substitution did. Now, he could proficiently use all the divine abilities, except for the 9 revolutions death substitution. Furthermore, his cultivation realm had advanced from the lifeblood refinement realm all the way to foundation establishment, then the golden core, primordial spirit realm, and finally the soul ascension realm. Perhaps in a few more years, he could advance from the soul ascension realm to the return to void realm. The future looked promising. After Hong Yuye left, his life became stable and peaceful. The only trouble was that her scent still seemed to linger in the bedding. It was very faint, but it was definitely there. So, he changed the bedding. The spirit beast had left the sect with Lin Ji and would return after some time. At the spirit herb garden, Cheng Cho ran over to him as soon as he arrived. Is something wrong? Jiang Hao asked. Yes. A Golden Core Realm senior came to demand an explanation, Cheng Cho said nervously. Jiang Hao wasn't surprised. Now that the problems in the sect had settled down, the Golden Core Realm seniors who had a grudge against him would naturally come to question him. If they were at a higher stage than him, he would have to endure it. But if they were at the same level as him, he wouldn't have any of it. Not everyone in the demonic sect had to endure everything quietly. Some people and things needed to be addressed with strength. He had experienced this when he was in the outer sect. True geniuses rarely came to suppress him. Only those who were similar to him in strength felt as though they were being overtaken whenever he advanced. He was clearly just an ordinary person. So, why would they think he was on par with them? What's the issue? Jiang Hao asked. That senior brother said the cultivation method for the spirit herbs was incorrect, and there was a deviation in the growth of the plants, Cheng Cho said. I'll go take a look. Jiang Hao nodded. The senior had come for him and wanted to establish his dominance. The way he needed to respond would depend on the senior's cultivation realm. At the edge of the spirit field stood a man with a pale complexion. His aura was relatively stable, and he was at the early stage of the Golden Core realm. In front of him, 3 ordinary non-cultivators knelt and trembled in fear. There was another person who was covered in blood. It seemed like he was beaten. If kneeling and begging could make up for losses, why would you need to compensate for anything else? The man looked at the 3 ordinary people with a cold smile. They could only beg for the senior's forgiveness or plead for mercy. Why are you arguing with them, senior? Jiang Hao walked over calmly. You are the one in charge of the spirit herb garden? The man looked at Jiang Hao with a smile. You don't need to thank me for teaching these scums a lesson, junior brother. I wanted to kill them at first but only educated them a little for your sake. I think they've learned their lesson. Junior brother, you won't blame me for meddling, right? Chapter 501, Chapter 501, I've always been this strong. Chapter 501, I've always been this strong. Looking at the three people who were still kneeling, Jiang Hao frowned slightly. These three were injured. It would affect the work in the garden. It was his first time seeing ordinary people being targeted like this. What was so interesting for a Golden Core Realm senior to bully someone weak? Jiang Hao didn't understand it. It seemed like many people behaved this way. Perhaps ordinary people were an outlet for their frustration. If a fellow disciple was accidentally killed within the sect, it would be a huge problem. But these ordinary people were not under the protection of the sect. What has made you angry, senior? Jiang Hao asked. You don't know? Go find out first, and then come and tell me after you know, said the senior. Jiang Hao frowned. Senior brother Zhong Liucheng says that the direction of growth of his 100 leaves flower is wrong. This flower has two growth possibilities. One is that it bears fruit, and the other is for the flower to bloom with 100 petals. This flower has chosen to bear fruit, but senior brother Zhong said he wanted 100 petals. That's right. Zhong Liucheng pretended to be angry. What explanation do you intend to give me for this, junior brother? Perhaps I could compensate you. Jiang Hao said. Sure, but this flower is extremely important to me. I nurture it like a child. Now that my child is growing incorrectly, it pains my heart, Zhong Liucheng said. Junior brother, how much compensation do you think is appropriate? How much do you want for it, senior? Jiang Hao remained calm. This amount. Zhong Liucheng held out 3 fingers. 3,000. Jiang Hao asked. The flower was worth about 500 spirit stones, so it couldn't be 300. No, Zhong Liucheng said. 30,000. 30,000. Cheng Cho exclaimed. How could that be? Jiang Hao knew that Zhong Liucheng was doing this on purpose. He couldn't even come up with 30,000 spirit stones in the Soul Ascension realm, let alone the Golden Core realm. Too expensive? Then what compensation would you offer, junior brother? Zhong Liucheng sneered. When you entrusted the spirit herb, you didn't specify the type of growth you wanted, senior brother. Jiang Hao looked at the record. Is a reminder needed for this? Everyone knows that I wanted 100 petals flower. Don't you take care of that while collecting the seeds? Zhong Liucheng asked. But when I took the seed and asked the senior who took it from you, he said you were okay with it bearing fruit, senior brother, said Cheng Cho. If he said yes, does that make it okay? If I say you're a traitor, would that make you a traitor? Zhong Liucheng looked at Jiang Hao and Cheng Cho. There are so many spirit herb gardens in this sect, and people there are very professional and courteous. I chose to help you, and this is what I get. Is this the result of me trusting you? Cheng Cho was anxious. But what? Zhong Liucheng asked. Did I force you to accept it? Weren't you willing to take on the herb? Now that there's a problem, you want to blame it on me. I haven't encountered this kind of problem in other spirit herb gardens. Why do I have to face the problem only here? Jiang Hao lowered his head and remained silent. Cheng Cho opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. He didn't even know how to refute it. Some people around them looked at them but dared not approach them. They were afraid of being roped in. The 3 individuals who were kneeling earlier also dared not make any movements. They didn't want to offend the angry senior. I can offer 2 solutions, Jiang Hao said. Do you want to hear them, senior? Brother? Zhong Liucheng sneered. Tell me. The first one is that we can offer you the amount of the flower and an extra 5 spirit stones. 505 spirit stones. It will be enough for you to buy a new one, Jiang Hao said. Upon hearing this, Zhong Liucheng laughed mockingly. Tell me about the second one. The second one is that, you didn't specify the type of growth while giving us the flower, so the consequences are your own fault, and we are not responsible for it, said Jiang Hao. Ha ha ha. Chapter 347, Chapter 347, Junior Brother Han's cultivation will soar to a whole new level. Chapter 347, Junior Brother Han's cultivation will soar to a whole new level. Jiang Hao opened his eyes. He might not have sensed it wrong just now. Normally, he wouldn't be able to locate Bai Yi. He had used the knowledge from the Nameless Manual, which allowed him to sense the other person's realm through the fluctuations of spiritual energy. This was the only way for him to clearly ascertain other people's cultivation. Was his cultivation affected by the challenge with the Manlong last time? Or is it due to a curse? He had abandoned the curse a long time ago. It was too risky to offend Hong Yuye after she had warned him. After a year of recuperation, his cultivation should have stabilized completely. In fact, he should have even attempted to advance his cultivation further. Why did it fall instead? Jiang Hao was surprised, but he couldn't stop with the sealing process. Bai Yi was cunning. He could deceive Jiang Hao and make life hard for him again. He gripped the long spear. This time, he only utilized his own strength without activating his divine ability. Swish. The spear enveloped in purple energy whistled through the air. In the valley, Bai Yi was sitting on a chair. I heard we suffered some losses with the spirit herbs. Yes, there was a major incident at the Cliff of Broken Hearts, and many of the spirit herbs were affected. The losses have been compensated, and we're not lacking in spirit stones, said Lian Qin. I always feel that the Cliff of Broken Hearts gets into a lot of trouble. It's not that cliff that has issues, it's that everyone targets that branch. There are many things happening beyond our view as well. We're just not paying attention to them. Bai Yi smiled. Have you found the suitable spirit herbs? I need a few more days. Almost done. Sooner would be better. It'll become ineffective soon, Bai Yi said. He had thought of many ways to save himself. In the end, he could only use the methods from the past. This was the best option. He was about to say something more when he suddenly looked toward the outside of the valley. After over a year, that purple light appeared again. Boom. The long spear shot through the sky, broke the formation, and headed straight for Bai Yi. The defensive shield activated just in time. Unfortunately, under the assault of the spear, the shield shattered instantly. The spear pierced through Bai Yi like lightning. Bai Ifa screamed, and blood splattered. The purple energy once again surged into Bai Yi's body and injured him. Lian Qin was dumbfounded. It was so fast that she couldn't react in time. As she snapped back to her senses, she quickly arrived at Bai Yi's side. She felt that her senior brother might die. At that moment, she experienced an unprecedented fear. Isn't everything fine now? Why is he back again? What does he want us to do? Whatever he wants, we'll do it. We'll do it all. Bai Yi coughed blood. He smiled weakly. It's okay, I'm fine. He has weakened his attack. He only wants to seal my cultivation. I still have hope. There's still hope. He coughed up more blood. Despite that, he was still hopeful. Lian Qin didn't understand. But they couldn't just give up. Every time the person appeared, it was a huge blow. Both psychologically and physically. Jiang Hao had already left the 100 Bones forest. Although he was puzzled by Bai Yi's condition, he didn't think much about it. He needed to observe the situation first. After all, Bai Yi wasn't an ordinary true disciple. He had significant achievements to his name. It was necessary to consider the implications of crossing him. Jiang Hao stood on the balcony of his house. He felt that the people he had encountered recently were all very strong, especially those related to the gathering. Zhuang Yuzhen, Ji Yuqing, and others. They were all connected somehow. Was it all just a coincidence? Jiang Hao hesitated and took out the stone tablet. He suddenly remembered something. He used the daily appraisal on the stone tablet. Chapter 502. Chapter 502. This time I'll bring back 3 disciples who will surpass Xiao Li and the others. Chapter 502. This time I'll bring back 3 disciples who will surpass Xiao Li and the others. This time, Jiang Hao didn't ask the person to talk privately. The person had come with the intention of humiliating Jiang Hao in front of everyone. He also wanted to make an example of this person to others of the same cultivation realm as him. In the demonic sect, he needed to be cautious in dealing with people with a high cultivation realm and strong background. But if they were similar in cultivation realm and strength, He couldn't bow down and take this kind of humiliation quietly. If the other person showed some courtesy, he would reciprocate in kind. However, if the person was arrogant and unreasonable, then being equally arrogant was the way to go. He didn't want to give in and handled the situation as he saw fit. Since everyone had seen this, people would think twice before doing something similar. This way, even if people didn't like him, they wouldn't come looking for trouble. Bowing down to someone practicing the bloodwish path might hurt their pride, but if they couldn't defeat him, then they would better acknowledge it and move on. Furthermore, they still had a sense of superiority when compared with others in the bloodwish path. They thought the practitioners of the bloodwish path wouldn't live much longer. Maybe that will put their mind at ease. After that, Jiang Hao had the injured trio sent back to recuperate. Their injuries were not small, but fortunately, they would recover. Jiang Hao then collected the bubbles floating around. The subtle changes in his body brought him great joy. Although the progress was slow, he was indeed getting stronger. It was different from getting stronger through cultivation. Even now, without his cultivation, he was naturally a person with innate strength and a strong spirit. It had only been about 20 years since he started cultivation. He was still young. Given 100 years, there would be significant changes. By then, he could easily defeat someone in the soul ascension realm. After taking care of the spirit herbs, Jiang Hao went to the market. In the past few days, he had been to the Lawless Tower and inquired about some formation-related questions. He also asked some seniors who sold formations about the blueprint. He had a general understanding of the functions and usage of formations. What was left now was to gather materials. This time, the upgrade in formations would allow him to block others from entering his place at will. He didn't know how many spirit stones it would cost, but he expected it to be quite a lot. Last time, it was already too expensive, and this time would be no different. However, he had an invitation to sell. He had singled out 3 young talents who wanted to obtain invitations from the royal family. One person was from the Candlelight Pill Pavilion and was at the late stage of the Golden Core realm. His alchemy skills were good, but he had a gloomy personality. Dealing with him would bring unnecessary trouble. The second was cold and somewhat aloof, but he was a decent person. He was at the late stage of the Golden Core realm, too. However, he was poor and couldn't pay many spirit stones. After appraising him, Jiang Hao found out that he was looking for a partner and had a prearranged agreement with a princess from the royal family. The third was at the early stage of the Golden Core realm and was studying formations. He could make a trade, but if he was displeased, things might get difficult. He had to choose one of these 3 because whoever got the invitation would have to leave soon. Going to the Imperial City would take quite some time, especially for Golden Core realm cultivators who weren't particularly strong. The question was whom to choose among the 3. The first person would undoubtedly give the most spirit stones, but his personality was too dark, and it was easy to attract attention. If he never went out, there wouldn't be a big problem, but trouble would inevitably arise if someone kept an eye on him in the future. The second person wouldn't be able to pay much in spirit stones, but the trade would be the safest. The third person could initiate more transactions. Based on his many years of trading experience, he wouldn't let himself or the seller feel dissatisfied. Ideally, he seemed to be the best choice. But he chose the second person. This was a man in his late 20s and had stable cultivation and decent strength. The young man was setting up a stall to sell spirit herbs. "What kind of spirit herbs do you want, junior brother?" a man asked when he saw Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao shook his head. "I'm not here to buy spirit herbs, but I'm selling something you might be interested in." "What are you selling?" The man was a little puzzled. "I'm selling something that might interest you, senior brother," Jiang Hao said earnestly. "Not many things interest me," said the man, and laughed. "Well, are you interested in matters related to the royal family?" Jiang Hao looked at him. The man was momentarily stunned, then he packed up his stall. "Can we talk in private?" This made Jiang Hao alert. He remembered saying similar things to many seniors because he wanted to sneakily attack them. Now, he felt that others might also be planning the same. But he agreed. They walked to an empty corner. I am Luo Zhong from the Thunderfire Peak. What about you? Luo Zhong asked politely. Jiang Hao from the Cliff of Broken Hearts, Jiang Hao said. What are you selling, junior brother? Luo Zhong looked conflicted. This. Jiang Hao took out the royal invitation. Luo Zhong's eyes lit up. Where did you get this, junior brother? A senior gave it to me, Jiang Hao said. The invitation was meant for Mu Qi, but Miao Tinglian had given it to him. She didn't have ill intentions, so it could be considered a gift. She always pestered him with matchmaking, but she was always good to him. It was just that the matter was too much of a hassle for him. After a moment of silence, Luo Zhong asked, How much are you asking for it? How many spirit stones do you have, senior brother? Jiang Hao asked. Luo Zhong lowered his head. I have less than 3,000, he said in embarrassment. This surprised Jiang Hao. He is this poor. I've used it all to improve my cultivation and strength. Earning spirit stones isn't that easy, Luo Zhong said awkwardly. For a cultivator at the late stage of Golden Core Realm, not having 3,000 spirit stones was indeed embarrassing. Jiang Hao knew he was poor, but he didn't expect him to be this poor. However, I can write an IOU. I will pay you back later, Luo Zhong said hastily when he saw Jiang Hao hesitate. Jiang Hao lowered his head. This kind of thing was useless because he could never be sure if this person would actually pay him back. In the end, he sighed. We don't need an IOU, but I have a condition. Please, junior brother, go ahead, Luo Zhong said happily. After you go to the Imperial City, tell me everything you see and hear there, Jiang Hao said. Just that. Just that. All right, I promise. Jiang Hao lowered his head. The Imperial City is not safe. Are you sure you want to go? Junior brother, you must be joking, Luo Zhong said with a smile. Which place is ever safe entirely? Jiang Hao was stunned. In the end, he sold the invitation for 2,500 spirit stones. He felt that it was a loss. This time, his approach hadn't been practical, but it was too late to regret it. As for the condition, he had only mentioned it as a second thought. If it could be fulfilled, that would be good, but it didn't matter in the end. After that, he found a formation master and inquired about the price. 8,000. Jiang Hao was dumbfounded. The material cost was so high. He almost coughed up blood in indignation. That is my offer, but the final price would be different. Why? Because you'll need to find a grandmaster. I, at my level, can't create this formation. Jiang Hao was speechless. Finally, Jiang Hao went to the Stellar Tower. The final price was 13,000. The spirit stones from selling the invitation couldn't even cover a fraction of the total price. He had to give up and figure something out later. The expenses were too high. He had just ascended to the Golden Core Realm in the eyes of the others, and if he spent such an extravagant amount, it would look suspicious. The next day, Jiang Hao found that junior brother Han Ming had returned and took on a sect mission. It was a mission to recruit disciples. Senior brother Jiang, this time, I will also bring back 3 disciples. They will definitely surpass junior sister Xiao Li and the others, Han Ming said. He had specifically come to tell Jiang Hao that. Naturally, Jiang Hao could only play along. As for the outcome, they would only know it in a few days. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.